Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 287, Pereira versus Adesanya 2, or 4, depending on how you count it. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, I can't even say as always because it's been a couple weeks since we've actually been on camera together. Back with me again, as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
You know what? I always like to be honest. I like to be honest with you. You're the best, host in the business. I think we have the best listeners in the business, so I try to be honest with them. But not doing that well, man. When you try to get excited for a card, and I can't get excited for this card when you have Chase Sherman and Chris Barnett on the card, and it gets canceled. I mean, that's the people's main event.
It was the people's main event, and we'll get to that when we get to it. But poor Chase Sherman. They managed to find a guy that he was a 2-1 favorite over, turns around, and now he's a 5-1 underdog. It's like, poor Chase. Oh, man. Plenty more trivia about Chase Sherman when we get to that fight, but I share your heartbreak there. If you're watching this on YouTube as opposed to just listening to the audio, you see that both Keith and I have our opening day hats on. I, of course, repping your Houston Astros, America's most hated baseball team, and Keith repping the Boston Red Sox. And that's all we're going to say about baseball out of respect to his Red Sox. We're going to dig right into this UFC 287 card. These two, obviously, they fought for the first time. Well, they fought for the first time in MMA last November at UFC 281. Let's do a little walk down fantasy lane here. If Adesanya wins that fight, say Pereira hurts him in the 5th round but doesn't finish him, Adesanya wins a righteous decision, just 3 rounds to 2. Where are both these guys right now? Who's Israel Adesanya fighting in the spring of 2023?
Oh, that's a good question. Honestly, being that he's made his rounds in the division, they could go with like a guy who deserves it. Maybe like, well, it'd be someone new. It wouldn't be your Whitaker or your Vettori. It could be like Duplessis, or they could go with the fight that would have sold the most, which would have been Khamzat Chimaev. I think it'd be Chimaev.
There you go. I mean, other than that, I was going to ask, would there be any chance he takes another shot at 205? But there's so much of a weirdness going on there that it doesn't need an extra element thrown in.
Yeah. No, I think he'd be fighting Chimaev or maybe he'd be making rounds. I mean, maybe a third Whitaker fight, I guess.
Dude, here's the real question. What's Pereira doing in that case? Because he's proven that he belongs. He can hang with Adesanya. He almost won. He had him hurt in the 5th round of a fight where, he ends up losing 3 rounds to 2, but every wrestler in the division is still licking their chops for him. Like, what are they doing with Pereira right now?
Oh, he's probably, if he lost that fight, he'd, a pay-per-view opener or a prelim fight against I don't know. I always, like, I don't want to say Brad Tavares because he's always the guy I think of
Brad Tavares.
When I think of middleweights, I think of Brad Tavares. I mean, but that level guy. I mean, maybe up like maybe a Gregor Rodriguez or something like that.
Or do you take Jared Cannonier and see if Cannonier just gives him a kickboxing match?
Could be, maybe like a fight night main event against a Cannonier.
Yeah, just kind of weird how everything turned on a dime there, and
that's right.
we'll analyze that in about 2.5 hours when we get to that fight. But it's just interesting because when I started looking at their first fight, obviously rewatched it, kind of relived it round by round, and it took me back to my mindset going into that fight where I was already thinking what Adesanya would be doing in early 2023 if he beat Pereira like I picked him to. And I don't know if the middleweight division is better now for this, but it's sure more interesting.
Oh, it absolutely is. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And if Pereira wins, it opens up the entire division.
Yeah.
But if Adesanya wins, it puts everything on hold because now they're going to do a trilogy fight. A trilogy fight in MMA.
A quintilogy fight. They'll just go best of 7. What they should do is make them coach a season of tough against each other, because then they'd also end up doing like a free throw competition against each other. It's like the coaches challenge or arm wrestling. God, which one of these guys would win on arm wrestling? I don't know. Pereira's huge.
I don't know. I'm not betting on Izzy on that one. Unless he has like the Sylvester Stallone hat and he turns it around. You remember that from over the top?
That just turns his switch.
That's it. You just turn it around. You can out wrestle anybody.
One other difference. When these guys met for the first time, last November, obviously the narrative going in was Pereira was rushed into this. They're just trying to make this fight while they can before somebody beats Pereira and kills any hype. They're desperate for anything to give Adesanya. And I think the UFC had a bit of that prove it going into their first fight. They fought in Madison Square Garden. It was one of the most stacked cards of 2022. I mean, it had 2 title fights. The third fight from the top was Poirier versus Chandler. It was a monster card.
Yeah, it was crazy.
This one, not so much. Give me a grade for this card.
I'm still pretty high on it. I think there's some good prospects on the rise, and the main event to me is so intriguing. Even though they've battled each other for a long time now, I'm still so pumped for this main event. So I'll go like a B+. I'm
not as high on it, and probably that's because I was a little behind on my preparation, so I had to cram a lot of these fights kind of within the last couple days, like a lot of these fighters, and so I'm really grouchy at the undercard right now. It's like I don't like this fight. So but I mean, you said B+.
Yeah, I'll go like a B+.
I'll give it a C+. I mean, it's got some interesting stuff on the undercard. The main card is, Burns versus Masvidal. Honestly, I understand why it's the co-main event, but Font versus Yanez is a better and more interesting fight to me.
It's a harder fight to pick. I'll give that. When you think of the division of welterweight in what's at stake, I think that's and obviously the bigger names. Masvidal might be the biggest name on the card.
Yeah, Masvidal, honestly.
If not, he's number 2 behind Izzy.
18 months ago, there would have been no question he was the biggest name on the card. No, I can feel that. And I mean, talk about divisional stakes. If Kamaru Usman was still the champ, that would be a pretty meaningless co-main event. But
Masvidal wins, and I know the UFC is doubling down on this Colby Covington, and I'm not talking about that. Like, that thing's already been 2 weeks old, and like already sick of talking about that. But like, Masvidal starches Burns. You could sell Masvidal going into England fighting Edwards. I mean, there's a backstory there. Not saying he would deserve it. Not saying he would deserve it.
I mean, it's the rematch. The champ deserves a rematch. He got outstruck 3-0.
That's right.
In their first fight. On this card, outside of the main event, which is a title fight, who was closest to a title fight with a win? Is it Masvidal to you?
Rojas. Closest to it. Yeah, you said outside of the co-main event?
Outside of the main event. Like the main event is a title fight, but outside of that, you'd say Masvidal's the guy in the card who's closest to a title shot.
Or even Burns, if he does something spectacular and then Colby gets hurt or something like that, he's not far off. Nobody else is to me is even. I mean, maybe not even the female fights. All right, is anybody close? Joe Pyfer, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe just so like he doesn't have to be sleeping on Dana's couch anymore. I mean, every time they talk to Pyfer, he's like, Dana White took care of me when I was homeless. I assume that means he's just using Dana's guest room right now. So maybe Dana's like, I can get this guy a title shot and go get his own place. I don't know.
Who has a lot of stakes is the Gastelum Curtis fight. Not in the sense of the middleweight title shot, but if Gastelum beats Curtis and Adesanya loses, you could book that rematch. It was like a fight of the year candidate.
I mean, it was a fight of the year candidate. It was, for the longest time, the toughest fight anyone had given Adesanya in the UFC. I like that, man. I mean, outside of his 2 losses and the second Whitaker fight, it's still probably the closest fight anyone gave Adesanya.
I think it was closer than the Whitaker. I don't think the Whitaker fight was as close as people think. I think what happened is I think it's that he did better than we expect, so we give close rounds to him effect. I don't think it was that close, but
all right.
I'm like a wicked shill for for Adesanya.
Yeah. Well, which is saying a lot because like nobody hates Whitaker's game on the show either, you know.
No,
yeah.
Whitaker's the nicest guy on the planet.
Yeah.
Like,
Curtis versus Gastelum. Yeah, that's we'll have things to say about that when we get to it. In fact, the more I talk about this, even though I just gave this card a C+ or whatever, I want to just jump right in. You ready?
Yep.
All right. First up at UFC 287 is a strawweight matchup between the debuting Jackie Amorim and Sam Hughes. Amorim, the 27-year-old Brazilian by way of Florida. And by the way, that will be a recurring theme on this card as this card takes place in Miami. It is heavily loaded with Florida fighters or fighters who train out of Florida. But 27-year-old Brazilian training out of American Top Team is a perfect 6-0 in her mixed martial arts career. This will be her octagon debut. She comes in as the outgoing Legacy Fighting Alliance strawweight champ. She fought most recently last September at LFA 142, where she defended her strawweight title with a first-round armbar of Ashley Nichols. That was the 6th first-round finish in 6 professional fights for Ms. Amorim, and it was the first of her fights to go past the 2-minute mark. To say that she has been dominant would be an exercise in understatement. She's going to see if she can keep that going against Hughes. The 30-year-old Washington State native is 7-5 overall. She is 2-4 in the UFC. She lost her last time out. It was a unanimous decision loss to Piera Rodriguez at UFC Fight Night Grasso versus Araujo last October. That snapped a 2-fight win streak over Estela Nunes and Elise Reed. So Hughes looking to get back in the win column and possibly fighting for a job here against Amorim, looking to keep her undefeated hype and undefeated record going. Amorim is a strong favorite to get it done. She's minus 250, Hughes plus 200. There are two things I know about this fight, Keith. I know that Sam Hughes is better than I thought she was, but I also know that she has an absolutely dreadful style matchup in Amorim, because Hughes to me gets her best work done on the ground, and she definitely does the best when she is the better wrestler, when she can determine whether the fight takes place on the feet or on the ground. And unfortunately for her, that isn't that often. For someone who's a good-sized strawweight and like fairly like well-built, she gets pushed around a lot. Piera Rodriguez took her down. It might have been in all 3 rounds. I know she took her down in the first 2 rounds. And when Hughes wanted to take Rodriguez down, she was not always able to. I mean, she couldn't take down Tisha Torres in her UFC debut, despite being 3 sizes bigger than she was. Torres took her down and slammed her. This all spells trouble against someone in Amorim who, yeah, she's just 6-0 and relatively untested as an MMA fighter, but she's a two-time Mundials medalist. I mean, she never won the gold, but she came in 2nd and 3rd in Mundials. She won Mundials, I think, at the blue, purple, and brown belt levels. I mean, she's legit one of the most promising grapplers to cross over like she did, where she crossed over in her early to mid 20s, kind of said, all right, I've done enough. I've accomplished enough in grappling that, you know, I kind of know where I stand. I'm satisfied with that for now. I mean, I would rather have
make some money.
let's go make some money. Let's take on some people that aren't full of steroids. Well, less full of steroids. I mean, I would much rather have a 24-year-old who meddled a couple times crossover than like a 34-year-old who, you know, won Abu Dhabi multiple times, you know, like a Michelle Nicolini type. Yeah, it's the same thing we talk about wrestlers. I'd rather have the guy that was an All-American a couple times, but was, you know, training MMA when he was 20 than, you know, a guy that washed out of his Olympic dreams in his late 20s. So I think this is going to be a showcase for Amorim. Hughes has only been tapped out once as a pro, but you may remember it because it was her getting absolutely highlight reeled by Vanessa Demopoulos in LFA. I don't think Amorim's going to need to do anything that fancy. I mean, I think Amorim is going to be about as big as Hughes, much faster. Hughes likes to start out swinging and then be able to take it to the ground if she sees an advantage or she's getting traffic she doesn't like on the feet. I'm guessing that Amorim probably just takes her down with like a body lock and trip or something in the first round, and then nothing spectacular, probably just moves to mount and smacks her around until she turns her back and chokes her out, or maybe peels off for an armbar. But give me Amorim by first round submission, and the hype will keep going. I mean, she is attractive and marketable. She's super exciting in the cage. This fight won't answer any of the real questions that we have, like how will she look against somebody that she can't tap out in the first round? But it'll be plenty to get the UFC play-by-play and color commentators like get them going early.
Yeah, this is a fun fight to start off. I agree with a lot of things you said about Sam Hughes. Like, I agree that she's much better than her record it shows. She's definitely like your builder, where the pace picks up as the fight goes along. She definitely has like a boxing style, quick hands, good footwork, cuts angles well. She combines her kicks and her punches together well, which not many people do, especially like prelim UFC fighters. I think she's a little bit better wrestler than you credit her. I mean, she got takedowns against Leaks Reed, Stella Nunez. She likes to get in the upper body locks and get some takedowns. I think defensively is the issue, which is the big issue against someone like Amorim. She struggled defensively. Like Piero Rodriguez took her down like 4 times. She was taken down by Loma Lubumi, who I also think is an underrated wrestler who's actually really improved in her wrestling. To her credit, Sam Hughes does well to get back to her feet. If she ends up in a scramble and she's on top, some pretty decent top pressure. She has 3 submission wins, but you mentioned that Demopoulos submission in the past, and now she's facing the best grappler, someone even better than Demopoulos. Amorim on the feet, very wide base with her striking. Her striking, from what I've seen, I mean, she has 6 fights, 6 finishes. They're all like a minute long, so it's hard to get a lot of information on her striking. Most of her striking is just to close distance, though she does have a 10-second knockout over Megan Owen, where she lands this beautiful overhand right away. She throws a lot of naked leg kicks, so she's going to get blasted for that. But it's all about to get the fight to go. She shoots entries. She doesn't set them up well. She's kind of dives. She's definitely like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu wrestler than a pure wrestler. But what I do like is she cuts the corner well. She understands angles when she gets on the hips. She will pull guard. You mentioned she's an elite grappler. BJJ black belt, has medaled in the Mundials and stuff. We're not going to give her crap that she medaled and she's never won the championship. Like when we win podcast of the year, then we'll stop giving people, crap for only medaling, like Ariel, can you sprinkle at least one our way? Like,
yeah.
Or Luke Thomas or whoever these guys winning. When the fight hits the ground, I mean, you see how good she is. Smothering top control. She advances position on the ground really well. She's got all stoppages in the first round. She can get submissions from any position. I seen her hit the slick knee bar in the LFA. The big question about her entering this fight is the experience, but more the cardio. Like, how's her cardio, being that she just stops everyone so quickly? It's hard to trust Amorim, due to the lack of cage time and not seeing much on her feet other than like a 10-second knockout. But I'm with you, man. I'm still picking her hair. I think she finds a way to get the fight to the ground, even if she has to pull guard. Once she does, she finds a submission. I think I agree with you. I think it's going to be over early. I'm going to go first round submission too.
All right. Next up on the UFC 287 prelims is a featherweight matchup between Shayilan Nuerdanbieke and Steve Garcia. Shayilan, the 28-year-old Chinese fighter, is 39-10 overall. He is 3-1 since joining the UFC 2 years ago. He lost his debut to Josh Kulabau. Since then, he has rattled off 3 straight wins over Sean Soriano, TJ Brown, and Derek Minner. The most recent of those, the Minner fight, was last November at UFC Fight Night, Rodriguez versus Lemos, where he knocked him out on the ground in like a minute. He'll look to make it.
I don't remember that fight that much. Was there any talk about that fight afterwards?
Yeah, weird. I'm
surprised. I don't remember that happening.
Yeah, it was over real quick, and if anything came of it,
just move right on.
It was probably part of a bigger news story that just it got swept up in the flood. He's going to look to make it 4 straight, hopefully in uncontroversial fashion, against Garcia. The 30-year-old Jackson Wink product is 13-5 overall. He's 2-2 in the UFC. Worth noting, he's 1-0 since dropping the featherweight. He dropped the featherweight last October, took out Chase Hooper in just 90 seconds at UFC Fight Night Cater versus Allen. So he will look to keep the featherweight experiment going in successful fashion. He is not favored to do so. Shayilan is minus 210 as the favorite. Garcia plus 165 on the comeback. Man, poor Steve Garcia. He's a 6-foot-tall lightweight. He comes to the UFC and they match him against 3 straight guys who are bigger than he is. He gets Luis Pena, Charlie Ontiveros, and Meerschaert in his first 3 UFC fights.
Hold on a second. In fairness, it was Luis Pena. Who was the other 2?
Charlie Ontiveros.
Okay.
And Meerschaert.
All right. I mean, like two pretty low guys.
Oh, I'm not saying like, yeah, they're high level. And then he drops to featherweight, and they manage to find a featherweight who's taller than him too. Garcia's like, what do I have to do? He finally has a fighter shorter than him, but here I think is where the other shoe is going to drop, because the real problem with Steve Garcia to me is I was kind of surprised when he made it to the UFC period. I never thought he was that high level when he was in Bellator. You know, the Bellator experiment ended with him losing to like a still very green Ricky Tercios and a super washed up Joe Warren. And then, you know, he went back to fight in Jackson Wink's home promotion. I figured that's all we'd hear of him. He won on the Contender Series, didn't get signed because there were a couple of really impressive winners on that episode. I never figured we'd see him in the UFC, and here he is. And he's a big, tall guy who likes to strike, isn't a super great athlete, and has some defensive lapses and is kind of easy to take down. Like, Luis Pena is an underrated offensive wrestler, but Pena took him down pretty effortlessly and racked up like a 10-8 round, just mowing him down on the ground.
It's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. And on the flip side of that, Shayilan is someone who's done better in the UFC than I expected. Like, when you come out of China and you already have a journeyman's record, that's saying something, because the guys that come out of China and they're 20-1 are you know, not always.
He didn't have the James Krause of China opponent.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I was going to call him the Derek Minner of China. Like that's exactly what I was going to say. Kind of this short, compact guy who likes to brawl and go for opportunistic submissions. Yeah, and you know, already was like, you know, already had like almost 10 losses before he even got to the UFC. Yeah, he's like the Chinese Derek Minner. But since then, he's proven he's at least better than whatever version of Derek Minner we got last November. And in winning pretty straightforward fights over Sean Soriano and TJ Brown, he's kind of showed that he at least belongs. He's better than the bottom shelf of UFC featherweights. And he's done well in the ways that I always kind of look for when fighters, again, come over from China or from former Soviet republics, especially if they're physical specimens who you know, get by on a high motor or high athleticism. Does that carry over after a couple of cycles through USADA? In his case, it really has. I mean, he's proven that he has decent 3-round cardio, not elite for that division, but good enough. And yeah, he's still the same fighter he ever was. He's still just 28 years old. I mean, he may still be improving, even though he has the record of like a 36-year-old man. And here, I expect him to just have too much for Garcia. If he obliges Garcia with a brawl on the feet, I think he might still get the better of it. And I think he can take Garcia down if he wants. And if he's smart, he will. Give me Shayilan by decision here in what should be a really fun fight, but probably just because Shayilan makes it more fun than it needs to be.
Okay. Garcia, I mean, he's a southpaw. He's very big for the weight class. Moving down, he's going to be even bigger. Long and lengthy guy. On the feet, he's extremely aggressive. Like, you're saying that it'll be fun because of Shayilan instead of, like, you know, giving Garcia the fight he wants. I totally agree with what you're saying with that. But also, Garcia, if he gives the fight that Garcia wants, Garcia is going to make it fun because he's aggressive to a fault in a sense. Yeah. I mean, he walked into a incredible knockout by Meerschaert because of how aggressive he was. In fairness, his last fight, he looked a lot better. He teed off on Chase Hooper and he showed he's got some power. He dropped Chase Hooper 4 times in like, I don't know, a minute and a half or something.
Mhm.
But it might say more about Chase Hooper than Steve Garcia, as you know, Hooper's is as low as it is in the UFC. He's got very good volume, bit of a headhunter, good jab. His straight left is his best punch. He can overthrow his shots, which leaves him open to counter, and he can be like a wild brawler. He also defensively, he really he doesn't roll. He like really dips his head down and ducks to avoid shots, which is going to get him uppercutted or kicked, and then someone's going to time a kick or something and knock him out cold. He has some good kicks. He doesn't throw them enough, though. He will wrestle a little bit. But you mentioned it. He got a takedown against Luis Pena. He's got 3 takedowns against Charles Ontiveros, but he also was taken down in fights against Luis Pena, which is not a good idea. But he has some mean ground and pound if he's on top. I'm definitely not high on Steve Garcia, but he's like you said, he's fun. Nuerdanbieke, I didn't look at his notes again. Like, I wasn't going to learn anything from the Derek Minner fight since. So like, I took notes before the Derek Minner fight, and then whatever happened. Like, all right, we have 26 fighters I got to watch film on. I skipped Nuerdanbieke. So what I'll say we're not a gambling show, but there are some gamblers who watch the show. Can you do me a favor? I'm not a gambler, but if what'd you say? Nuerdanbieke's like a 2-1 favorite or something like that.
Yeah, he's like minus 210.
Yeah, if he turns into like a 10-1 favorite, can you let me know real quick so I can get him? Can I get a betting? Because I know some guys like to watch that stuff, so I can get a bet in real quick if the line moves drastically. Nuerdanbieke, I think I do think he's a minus athlete. I think he's a better athlete than Steve Garcia, but I still don't think he's like a great athlete for the UFC. But he's very strong, very stocky guy. He struggled with the speed of Josh Kulabau, but I think that fight has aged well. Like, Kulabau is much better than I thought he was. He has power. He loves his overhand right. He's a good wrestler. He's relentless to get the fight to the ground, though he will shoot without a setup. But he out-wrestled TJ Brown, which I think was pretty impressive. He showed really good hip control to not getting taken down in that fight. He needs to improve his top game. He struggled to keep the fight on the canvas. But he has a bunch of subs on the record, so you can get him that. I think the line shouldn't be as high for Nuerdanbieke. Like, I don't think he should be that big of a favorite. Because of the size of Garcia. He's a bigger guy. A guy who could probably match his power. But I'm still leaning Nuerdanbieke due to what you talked about, the huge wrestling advantage. I think he can get some takedowns himself. So I'll take Nuerdanbieke by decision.
Next up at UFC 287 is a 160-pound catchweight matchup in which the UFC is making lemons into lemonade here, as Ignacio Bahamondes and Trey Ogden both found themselves without dance partners, and the UFC matched them up. Bahamondes, the 25-year-old Chilean by way of Chicago. He's a product of Valley Flow Striking. He is 13-4 overall. He's 2-1 since joining the UFC out of the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted almost exactly 2 years ago, dropping a split decision to John McDessie. Since then, he has back-to-back third-round finishes of Roosevelt Roberts and Rong Zhu. The Zhu fight was last February. He got the first submission of his career, a third-round Bravo choke. So he's looking to make it 3 wins in a row. He had been scheduled to take on Nicholas Mota on this card, but Mota withdrew with, I believe he was sick, might have been injured, but he dropped out within the last week or so. So Ogden gets the call. Ogden had been scheduled to fight Manuel Torres a couple weeks ago, and Torres fell out of that card with an injury. So they brought Ogden along, bumped it up to 160 pounds for him, and he steps in. Ogden, a 33-year-old Kansas City native, former product of Glory MMA and Fitness, is 16-5 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He debuted last April at UFC on ESPN Luque versus Muhammad 2, where he dropped a split decision to Jordan Levitt. He came back last September at UFC Fight Night Sandhagen versus Song and won a unanimous decision over Daniel Zellhuber. In this fight, Bahamondes is a comfortable favorite. He's minus 290. Ogden plus 220. Keith, every time I look at Ignacio Bahamondes, I think they should make 160 or 165 pound division for him anyway. He's not the tallest lightweight in the UFC, especially after we just talked about Steve Garcia and his whole gauntlet of opponents, but he just seems huge. And Ogden's not small either. I like that this fight is at 160. Who do you like in the fight?
Yeah, you mentioned that. Besides like being a long and lengthy guy, I think he's a good athlete too, Bahamondes. He's a good striker on the feet, technically sound, fights out of both stances really well. I like that he uses his length and grabs at the hands, which we'll talk later on about one of the fighters in the main event where they like to use the hands, which I love. He switches stance mid-combination to continue to like change angles. Good volume. He uses pressure well. He can be a little too aggressive and get wild, kind of just winging overhands. But he's got a lot of like variety in his combinations, which I like. I like that he targets the body. He does keep his chin high in the air with a little tall man's defense, which is concerning, but he has some serious power. He doesn't like being pressured though. He wants to be the bull. But I love that he'll use like step in knees, a lot of kicks, use that in the game to keep his range. He's not much of an offensive wrestler, but he does have some like that tall man strong takedown defense where it's hard to take him down. And if taken down, he does well to get back to his feet. Rongzhu tried to take him down, and when he got him down, he swept Rongzhu. I apologize if I'm saying his name incorrectly.
Perfect, saying it perfect. Yeah.
Okay. He'll play a little BJJ off his back, which I don't like. Even though I did just say he can get back up to his feet, but what he does, he's got those long legs, so triangles and arm bars. He gets submissions in a lot of positions, but he's really good with those head attacks, guillotines, Darce chokes. He finished Rongzhu with a Darce choke, and going back to the regional scene, he showed that he has cardio to go 5 rounds. Now, Trey Ogden, I thought he beat Jordan Levitt, but to even lose to Jordan Levitt, it's aged better than it did at the time when I was making the Jordan Levitt jokes, but it's still not a good loss. You mentioned he's a big guy for the weight class. I think he needs more output on the feet. Like that's what cost him the Jordan Levitt, where he just didn't let his hands go enough. He needs to attack with more combinations instead of throwing a lot of single strikes. He looks for his right hand like way too much. A little bit of a Josh Koscheck, Dan Henderson, like winging overhand right. When he goes to the body, it's something I really love. He's just some good, body punches, good kicking game, throws a lot of calf kicks. Doesn't check leg kicks though. I mean, Jordan Levitt kicked him like 200 times in the fight. He will wrestle. He doesn't really set it up too well. He kind of overextends. He's hard to take down. He showed some good takedown defense. But when he was taken down, like against like Jordan Levitt, he struggled to get back up. But he did in that fight show really good submission defense. He's got 11 subs of his own on his record. He even almost submitted Jordan Levitt, which was a good thing. Like Levitt might have been saved by the bell. But another thing that cost him was that he faded in that fight and probably gave Levitt the win. And that was a fight where like it wasn't that high of an output. So I'm glad that these guys stayed on the card and they put them together. I just don't think this is a good matchup for Ogden. I think this is a mismatch. I think Bahamondes is better than him ever. I think he batters him on the feet for much of the fight until he finally finishes him off. I say it's going to happen late. Give me Bahamondes by 3rd round TKO. Yeah,
I'm feeling pretty much everything you're putting down here. And I like that you mentioned that Bahamondes he's a surprisingly nimble athlete because he looks like a Titanic lightweight and it's almost deceptive. He has a lot of finishes with kicks that you can tell that his opponent was just surprised. Like just surprised that the leg got out and tagged him in the liver or in the head as quickly as it did. He's got just deceptive speed. He's got a ton of power, partially just he's got natural power, just kind of that biomechanical advantage of when the lever is that big, just there's a certain amount of power that comes with it, that kind of Thomas Hearns thing. No, I'm not saying that he's the next Thomas Hearns, but that kind of thing. And
he's better on the ground.
Okay, side question. Who wins Jordan Levitt versus Chase Hooper in a kickboxing match?
It's Levitt.
Now these unlocked like the leg kicks of death.
That's it.
Would have been a harder question a year ago.
Yeah, I would have picked a referee.
The real question would have been how much I would have had to pay you to watch it. But yeah, I'm with you here. Like Ogden, it's been a cool story to see him get to the UFC. I'm glad that he's still getting fights and apparently kind of circled the wagons and gone back to his own gym in the wake of the collapse of Glory MMA and Fitness. But I'm pretty sure the Ogden versus Torres fight got far enough along that we previewed it, because I remember saying I'm concerned about what his training situation might be as far as, you know, bringing in UFC level training partners and, you know, or getting head coach instruction, because some guys can do okay as their own coach, but not many. And that question still lingers out there for me about Ogden. That plus he's the one that's kind of coming in, if not on short notice, kind of weird notice. All the things that might lead me to think an upset is more likely are not there. Like all those boxes are checked in Bahamondes' favor. He was the one already training to fight this week, and he's younger. He's improving from fight to fight. And as you said, he's probably a bad matchup for Ogden everywhere. Ogden's never been stopped in his pro career with strikes, but I'm with you. I think this is we see it for the first time here. I think Bahamondes just busts him up at range with his punches, sets him up for a highlight reel type kick, like either just crushes him to the body after showing the head kick, or maybe crushing him with a head kick after showing to the body. But yeah, Bahamondes by a second round knockout for me. We head now to the strawweight division for a matchup between the returning to the division Cynthia Calvillo and Lupi Godinez. Calvillo, the 35-year-old Californian, is 9-5-1 overall. She is 6-5-1 in the UFC. She's 5-1-1 at strawweight, however, off of a draw with Marina Rodriguez in the at UFC on ESPN Overeem versus Rosenstrike back in 2019. She decided to move up to flyweight. She won her debut at flyweight against Jessica Ai, and then dropped 4 straight fights against Caitlin Chikagian, Jessica Andrade, Andrea Lee, and Nina Nunes. Given that the 125-pound experiment clearly was not working, Calvillo moves back down to the division where she was once a pretty highly regarded prospect, in the hopes of salvaging anything and not losing her 5th straight fight. Standing in her way will be Godinez. The 29-year-old Mexican by way of Canada is 8-3 overall. She's 3-2 in the UFC. She lost her last time out. It was a unanimous decision against Angela Hill at UFC on ESPN Vera versus Cruz last August. Prior to that, she had won back-to-back fights over Loma Lookboonmee and Ariane Carnelossi. Odds here pretty heavily favor Godinez. She is minus 245, Calvillo plus 195 in her return to 115. Keith, on the one hand, Cynthia Calvillo lost 4 straight fights, and nobody would have been surprised if she'd retired or been, cut by the UFC. But,
no one retires. I mean,
no one retires.
She'd be doing like duet Siamese boxing with Bob Sapp and Fight Staircase or some shit.
She trains out of Thailand. It'd be real easy to get her on one of those cards. But you look at it, they weren't bad fighters she lost to. I mean, Caitlin Chikagian and Jessica Andrade were top contenders. Andrea Lee and Nina Nunes were at least kind of middle of the road UFC fighters. I think I know what the answer to this is already, because I've previewed enough Cynthia Calvillo fights with you. But is there any spark? Is she going to rekindle any interest here by dropping down to 115 against Lupi?
Well, she can't get worse.
That was about the answer I expected. Maybe delivered with a little more style. Excellent. I love that.
I was never like the biggest Cynthia Calvillo. She definitely had moments. Yeah, but I like her going down to 115. I don't know if Lupi Godinez is the right opponent because you kind of want to go down. You're the smaller person. You want to be stronger. You're going against one of the strongest person in the division, and Godinez might be the wrong opponent. But besides that, Calvillo looks like she's declined. She's a terrible athlete. There's nothing that jumps off the page for me in a good way when I watch Cynthia Calvillo. She's a boxer. She fights out of both stances. She likes to slip and rip. But I think her striking is pretty weak. She throws a lot, but she lacks power. She throws a lot of kicks, but there ain't nothing special in those kicks. She's very heavy on her front foot, so she's open to leg kicks. I mean, Nina Nunes, who, yeah, she's good, but I mean, this is Nina Nunes that had a baby, was gone for a long time, right. Yeah. She fought Mama Nunes, not.
Post baby Nunes for sure.
Yeah, like gone for a long time. She's an undersized fighter for the division too, and she destroyed Calvillo with leg kicks. Calvillo is pretty much a one-dimensional fighter. She's a grappler, and the issue with her grappling is she's not a wrestler. She's a weak wrestler. She will shoot, but it isn't great. If she gets to fight the ground, she does have some good back takes, and she has some hard ground and pound. I'll give her that. She does have a mean streak in her. Now, Godinez is a wrestle boxer who pressures really well on the feet, good volume. She does well to cut off the cage and trap her opponents. She works to get in the pocket and unload tight shots, quick hands, great power. She's pretty accurate. She showed that. Like her right hand blasted Silvana Gomez Suarez. She generates really good power when she steps in her shots. She's a strong wrestler, good entries, very physically strong. I mean, she gets on the hips and she just slams you. I go back to when she threw Jessica Penne around like a rag doll. She did the same thing against Gomez Suarez. She took down Moma Labumi.
Oh, Carnalissi, like the official protein snack of the Shillan and Duffy show. She threw her all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, I was building up to that. Like,
oh, sorry.
Oh. Yeah, no, that's fine. Listen, Ben, I'm never going to complain about you interrupting me. Like, I don't think that's. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody in the comments saying, "Damn, Ben interrupting Keith again."
So someone's got to tally, like keeping score out there.
Yeah. It's 3,000 to 3, and all 3 times you did it, you were like correcting something I said that was wrong. Yeah, I mean, she was slamming around Carnalissi, which is good. She hit. I wrote this in my notes, and I kept in it. She hit this beautiful duck under against Carnalissi. Just the reason why I liked it, you just don't really see duck unders a lot in MMA. The only person that she struggled to get down was Luana Carolina, but that was like Carolina was way too big for her. And the other person I was surprised she couldn't get down, and that was Angela Hill, but that was because she just completely abandoned the wrestling against Angela Hill and fought exactly the fight that Angela Hill wanted. She circled the perimeter of the cage and just let Angela Hill hit her. If you try to take her down, she's a really strong takedown tense, strong top game, really good at, like you saw in the Carnalissi fights, just following the hips. And she sort of some slick BJJ with her belly down armbar against Suarez. I mean, I'm taking Godinez here. I think she beats Calvillo everywhere. I think she lands better shots on the feet. When Calvillo goes for takedowns, I think Godinez is going to be the person that ends up on top. I think Calvillo is tough that she'll make it to the distance, but I think she gets the break speed off of her. I think we might even get some 10-8 rounds. As long as Godinez doesn't fight like she fought like Angela Hill, which she's not attacking, not being the bull, but I expect we see good Godinez. Multiple, maybe a 10-8 round, maybe multiple 10-8 rounds. Give me Godinez in a blowout.
I just for the sake of the interest of our listeners, I wish I had something to argue with you about here. And really, this undercard in particular is full of 3-1, like 2-1, 3-1, 5-1 favorites. I'm not going to make an upset pick just to be contrarian, although every time I'm looking for things that might lead to one. But here, as same as in other fights we've talked about, even the unknowns seem to break in Godinez's favor, because Calvillo looked largely miserable at flyweight, but also she moved up to flyweight because she was moving into her mid 30s and was uncomfortable with the cut to 115 and just thought she'd perform better at 125. So it now being 3+ years later, she's now 35, going to turn 36 in a couple months. I can't picture her being better at 115 than when she left off. So yeah, she's going against a younger, fresher fighter who's physically better suited to the weight class, a much better athlete, and actually does have a couple of elite level skills where, as you pointed out, there's really nothing Calvillo does at a standout level at this point. Calvillo would kind of need to win a grindy grappling match or a low power, medium output striking match. Godinez isn't going to give her either of those things. I think this will go to the ground, and it's going to go to the ground by Godinez throwing her around quite a bit. I'm with you on it's probably going to go to decision. Calvillo remains tough. She is a wily veteran. She's only been stopped by a serious accumulation of damage or just getting blitzed by someone like Jessica Andrade. But yeah, give me Godinez to win a really lopsided decision here as well. We head now to the middleweight division for a matchup between Gerald Meerschaert and Joseph Pyfer. Meerschaert, the 35-year-old Wisconsinite, is 35-15 overall. He is 10-7 in the UFC. He won his last time out. It was a third-round guillotine choke submission of Bruno Silva last August at the UFC Vera versus Cruz card. Prior to that, he had lost a unanimous decision to Krzysztof Jotko, but he'd won 3 straight before that. So he has won 4 of his last 5 since providing part of the UFC's introduction to Khamzat Chimaev back in 2020, and just reminded the fans in general that he's still a pretty damn good fighter. He's going to get to fight yet another fairly highly touted prospect in the form of Pyfer. The 26-year-old Pennsylvanian is 10-2 overall. He's 1-0 in the UFC. He won his way into the UFC in his second try on the Contender Series last July. He knocked out Osman Diaz in the second round. Much was made of kind of his emotional story, his struggles and so forth with injury and everything else. The UFC signed him. He debuted in September with, gonna just put it out there, about as softball a matchup as the UFC could possibly give him without signing somebody new, as he plunked Alan Amadovsky in 4 minutes. And, well, here he takes his step up to take on a real, live, dangerous opponent who is above 500 in the UFC and has finished, if not better, at least more proven fighters than Pyfer. So Pyfer gets a bit of a test here, and he is favored to pass. He's -190, Meerschaert +160. Keith, explain to me why Meerschaert isn't just going to get beat up on for 11 to 13 minutes and then guillotine this man.
That's exactly probably how it's gonna go. You know what my favorite about the whole preview, your whole intro, was that you said like Alan Amadowski is the biggest softball, in the UFC. I just imagine, because he just sounds like he'd be so much better. Like if you're a manager of a guy making his, professional debut or even an amateur debut, and they're like, yeah, we got offered this guy. He's also making, I don't see his record name, but his name is Alan Amadowski. Now we'll fight on the next card. No.
And they show you a picture of him. He's this jack dude, like this 32-year-old Macedonian,
Amadowski? No, I'm good.
Yeah.
Is there a Mick Williams around?
Yeah.
Is there a guy from New England? Is there a New England guy around? We'll find out. Gerald Meerschaert. Gerald Meerschaert is like the definition of grizzled middleweight veteran. He's a minus athlete that just wins fights by being super tough, super intelligent, super just like gamey, if that's even a word, just like always being there. He fights with a high pace, southpaw, good volume. He's definitely a builder. Besides his volume going up, it almost seems like his confidence rises. Like when it starts getting to those tough minutes in the fight, he knows he's mentally tough. His hands are kind of slow. Kicks are a good part of his game, especially kicks from the southpaw into the orthodox stance against an opponent, especially to the body. Not a strong offensive wrestler, but good enough to time takedowns. To think, get his opponents thinking he's striking and then drop down or something, or just kind of creating a scramble and finding something. He's a bad defensive wrestler. Something that makes it worse because he's a guy that will jump guillotine, but to his credit, his guillotine's nasty and he's a submission threat everywhere. His last fight against Bruno, they were talking about that he catches submissions in transitions, and I think that's actually a really good. He's not a guy who takes you down to sum up. He just catches it as a scramble happens. He does struggle to get off the bottom, but he can get a sub from there. My big concern is he's taken a lot of damage over the years. I mean, he's 35, but he's an old 35. I mean, the bottom could drop on him at any time. Now, Joe Pyfer is a hard-hitting guy. He's serious power. He throws like a power jab, and then he just whips his power shots behind it. His KO on the Contender Series is like one of my favorites ever. It was fantastic. His left hook is super dangerous. I am worried about him going against a guy like Meerschaert because he is all power shots, and if he gets tired, that's like Meerschaert's world. And he has slowed down a little bit, and he doesn't like being pressured. He wants to be the guy being the bull. He has some hard calf kicks. He isn't like we think of Pyfer and these knockouts. He isn't just a striker. Like he's very physically strong. I think that's why he's a pretty solid wrestler. Some slick back takes. I have seen him ride a little too high in the back in loose positions, and he only has 2 submissions. But he almost got a head and arm choke on the Contender Series, so it's something to watch. The X's and O's, it seems like this should be an easy fight to pick. Like it should be Pyfer, but I actually think it's a really hard fight to pick. Like Pyfer has all the tools, but I've seen Meerschaert get this done so many times. This is a huge step up in competition for Pyfer, and I've really flip flopped on this one. But I am going to go against my own judgment, and I am going to take Pyfer. I think he lands a big shot, and perhaps this is the decline of Meerschaert that we've been waiting for. I think Pyfer gets a first round KO, but if he doesn't knock him out early, it doesn't hurt him, doesn't get 2 rounds in the bag and kind of run away a little bit. The next bet, like if you're a gambler, like I'd take a Pyfer first round knockout or inside the distance, and I'm or just take inside the distance, like because it's either Pyfer going to win early or most likely, or Meerschaert catches something late. So I don't know what the under the distance bet is or something like that. We save that for the betting shows, but that's something I would bet on if if the odds were somewhat okay. But yeah, I'll say Pyfer by. Against my, I'm talking myself out as I'm talking, but I'll take Pyfer by knockout.
First round, second round.
Yeah, first round.
Well, this feels to me like a 2 true outcomes fight. It is possible to catch and knock out Gerald Meerschaert early. Obviously, the 17-second loss to Khamzat Chimaev was going to stick in everyone's mind. It's what really cemented Chimaev's hype train. Blowing out Jack Marshman in his UFC debut. Everyone's like, well, yeah, but Marshman was on his way out of the UFC anyway. But beating a pretty good fighter in Meerschaert in 17 seconds is when everyone kind of opened their eyes.
Face planted him. Yeah, face planted him. That's always going to be part of Chimaev's highlight reel. It's also always going to be part now of the scouting report on Meerschaert, even if that isn't fair. Because if it was easy to do that, more people would have done it. Like Ian Heinisch did it. Ian Heinisch hits like a truck, and at the time that fight happened, was still pretty well regarded. He was like a fringe contender at middleweight, and then Chimaev, who still might well be a future champ. There are 2 things I know coming into this fight. Pyfer is built in the mold of the guy that could absolutely put Meerschaert away early. He's super aggressive. He hits really hard, and there's subtlety. He doesn't just come out swinging like a maniac. I mean, you pointed out the Osman Diaz
knockout. What was beautiful about that was it was this perfectly timed little short left. It wasn't like he just came in, swinging this massive overhand. It was like a beautiful piece of work in traffic that just flatlined Osman. So of course he could do it, but Pyfer, this is a huge step up in competition. He's only been to the third round once, and it was in like his second fight. He's mostly been knocking people out in the first round or knocking him out in the second round of fights he was dominating ever since then. Meanwhile, Meerschaert, he's 10-7 in the UFC. All 10 of his wins are finishes, and like 8 of them are submissions in the second or third round. Like, that is what Meerschaert does. He survives the onslaught, unless he doesn't, and then he guillotines you, or he takes your back and chokes you out in the second or third round. If Pyfer knocks Meerschaert out in 2 minutes, I'll know something. We'll all know something new about Pyfer. We might be learning something new about Meerschaert, like maybe it is the beginning of that long, slow decline. But I've seen this movie before, and I know how it ends. So, unless this is a gritty and depressing reboot of the Gerald Meerschaert movie, give me Meerschaert to probably pass through some danger in the first round, survive, even if he loses that first round badly, even if he's a little bit rung up. It's going to be opportunistic moments for Meerschaert and danger for Pyfer the longer it goes on. And I don't trust Pyfer not to get tired and or make a mistake in such a major step up in competition. So I might look silly in 90 seconds, but Meerschaert second round submission here.
Meerschaert's going to win.
We head now to the heavyweight division for the obligatory unranked heavyweight slobber knocker of UFC 287. And I got to tell you, they don't get much more unranked than this, as it is Karl Williams versus Chase Sherman. Let's introduce Sherman first as the guy who knew he was on this card all along. The 33-year-old Mississippi native is 16-11 overall. He is an absolutely dismal 4-10 in the UFC. That is across multiple stints with the promotion, but he is 2-5 since returning most recently. He's on a 2-5 run. He did make it to the final horn his last time out. It was a unanimous decision loss to Waldo Cortez Acosta at UFC Fight Night Zechiku versus Kudalaba last November. Prior to that, he had knocked out Jared Vandera in the third round at UFC on ESPN Dos Anjos versus Fiziev last July. Sherman had been scheduled to fight Chris Barnett in what would have been the people's main event. As Keith mentioned, it would have been pure joy. It would have made everything about this card worthwhile. Unfortunately, Chris Barnett withdrew either due to injury or running into a sign that said, "You must be this tall to ride." We're not sure on exactly what it is, but on short notice and short turnaround, back comes Karl Williams. 8-1, 33-year-old out of Atlanta, Georgia. He fought on the Contender Series last September, took a unanimous decision over Jimmy Lawson, got the call to fight Lucas Brzezinski just in March. It will be 4 weeks layoff. He took a unanimous decision over Brzezinski at UFC Fight Night, Jan versus Dvalishvili. He steps in on short notice here, and he comes in as a massive favorite. Sherman, poor guy. He had been almost a minus 200 favorite against Chris Barnett. He gets his opponent flipped at the last minute. Williams is as high as minus 500 on some outlets. He is minus 390 or minus 400 is a good median for your respectable outlets. Sherman out there around plus 300 or plus 320. Chase Sherman, man, here we go. He is 4-10 in the UFC. That is the worst winning percentage of any fighter with at least 10 bouts in the UFC. Like, obviously, if you came to the UFC, you lost 3 in a row and you're gone, your winning percentage is 0. But if anybody that got a real chance, he has the worst UFC win percentage of any fighter with at least 10 fights in the UFC. Keith, you win a prize if you can tell me who is second worst. And it's a two-way tie, so if you can name me either of them. Think of fighters who got a lot of UFC fights and had a terrible record.
I had a guy in my head, and then I instantly popped out. Sam Alvey had a terrible run, but I don't think it's him because he did have a good run in between.
He's barely under 500 when you add it all out.
Yeah. the worst record in the UFC. Guy who had a big run. It's gonna be like super obvious when I.
One of them is super
TK?
obvious.
TK? No, he didn't have that many fights.
Mm-mm.
Why would I go? Why would I go back that far? I don't know.
All right. Well, it is a tie between Josh Berkman.
Josh Berkman. I would have. You give me 100 guesses. I would have guessed Josh Berkman because I thought he was actually okay.
Yeah. And Jessica I.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Former main event, Jessica I. Okay.
Yeah.
Jessica I makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. They're both like 4 and 8 or something.
You know why? You know why I would even think I thought of terrible fighters.
Yeah.
I don't think either one of them were terrible.
No, like they're not the worst fighters to pass through the UFC. There are plenty of people that went 0-3 and were never heard from again.
Yeah.
But they won enough early on, or like I was in a division that just needed a body, and Berkman, like he was on tough and he had some interesting wins early on. So he hung on and hung on and hung on. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
and anytime there's a trivia question, for some reason, Brad Tavares always goes in my head, and I couldn't get Brad Tavares on my head. I know the answer is not Brad Tavares. He's good.
Yeah, poor Brad Tavares. Why am I catching strays? I'm a perennial top 15 fighter. Like, what did I do?
Yeah, Brad Tavares is good. I couldn't get it. I'm like, get Brad Tavares out of your head.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, Keith, we've previewed a lot of Chase Sherman fights together. More than any man should have to.
Yes.
I've had my notes on him have not especially changed.
No.
He looks like everyone's idea of what a really good heavyweight should look like. He's a 6'4", 6'5", 250-pound guy who's not fat. He looks like a plus athlete. He looks like he should hit like a ton of bricks, and just none of it's true. He's a medium volume, low power striker, like notably low power striker for the heavyweight division. He's not a good offensive or defensive wrestler. He has acceptable cardio for heavyweight unless he's getting trucked. But if he's getting trucked, the fight doesn't go past, the first 7 minutes anyway. His only wins since he's been back, he's 2-5 since he's been back. And the 2 wins are Jared Vandera and Ike Villanueva, both of whom are just on the bottom shelf, and both of whom have also fought at 205. The good news for Sherman is that Williams used to fight at 205, but man, I almost want to pick Sherman here because I'm still not sold on Williams. You were higher on Williams than me coming into his last fight against Lucas Brzeski, and you were right. He beat him, and he beat him bad. I mean, he racked up at least 1 10-8 round and just completely dominated him. But I don't know how well that's going to age. Like, he may end up being the only guy that doesn't finish him. I don't know. And he's coming around on relatively short turnaround. It shouldn't matter because he's a kind of medium-sized heavyweight anyway. He weighed in at like 240 for that fight. He's going to be faster than Sherman. And if Sherman has his way, he'll engage in a kind of boxing range, just kind of boxing match. And Williams is going to be better than him at that. He has more natural power. He's got faster hands. I think he's a better kicker. Yeah, I can't do it. I can't pick Sherman. I almost did it. I almost pulled the trigger. Give me Williams to win going away. I bet he wins all 3 rounds. If he decides to take it to the ground, I bet he can take Sherman down. But why would he bother? He's going to be outlanding him on the feet.
So we were talking on the intro, and I was making jokes about this, Barnett versus Sherman fight get canceled. Then you're like, oh, they got a replacement for Chase Sherman. I had no idea.
So you were just throwing something out there, and it just happened to.
This is what I said to myself. And then you said, oh, the guys got 5-1 favorite, and I just want to play cool because we're professional. We're Short Dog, we're the leader in the news. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's a reason why you're full time and I'm not. That right there tells you. But I want to act professional. But then I was like, I don't know who it is. Before you even said the odds, but I'm like, I'm taking that person over Chase Sherman. Like, throwing whoever it's going to be. But
when you hear it's a 5-1 favorite, you assume okay. It's a pretty good fighter. Like, it's not Curtis Blades, but
I was like, oh, is it like Volkov they called up or something?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of. I would think you know what I'd rather do than break down a Chase Sherman fight? I'd like to like think of ways that Chris Barnett got hurt. Like was he at like I just think like he's at one of those like discos where they do it on rollerblades and he like pulled a muscle. Like he was doing a split and rollerblades or something.
I'm just thinking he's like at the Kroger trying to reach something on the top shelf and like knock the can off onto his head. You're thinking of something exciting.
Right. Well, I'm just saying something because like I feel like that's how he trains. Or he's like training and his coach is like
doing splits on the roller skates and like
but also still has like a slice of pizza in his hand too while he's doing it. Is like smiling like women and stuff. They got the disco music playing, you know.
I like this a lot better than my picture. Wow.
I just like picture his coach like holding pads, like, all right, Chris, we're gonna do a jab. And he's like, nah. It's like flying, spinning twirl kick. You know, and and he got hurt. I don't know. So put in the comments. What's the best way that he got injured?
Wrong answers only. If you know what really happened, don't ruin it.
Yeah. Don't say, oh yeah, he fractured his tibia or something. Like
unless one of us was right. If one of us was right, like please let us know.
Chase Sherman. You know what? I'm just gonna pass. Like, is that all right? Like, what am I gonna add to different? Like, he sucks at wrestling. He's got decent kicks. Like his calf kicks are okay. He's a guy who wins on volume but doesn't have volume. If that makes sense.
Well, that would explain his win-loss record.
Yeah, I'm just done with. At least Chase Sherman, when he had his manager writing tweets for him and stuff, was fun. Like, go back to that. Like, we all know it's fake, but it's okay. Like, hire some comedian and, just let them call up Adam Hunter and just like, hey, Adam, you want to run my Twitter? And like, hey, Adam Hunter.
All the jokes that you, Adam, don't want to put out yourself because you don't want the heat, like, just do them from my account.
Chase Sherman. Yeah. He can be like a funny Colby Covington, but terrible fighter somehow. I don't know. Carl Williams. So I pulled while you were introducing Sam Hughes, I was pulling notes for Carl Williams. He's a smaller heavyweight. I think he's a good athlete. He's very explosive, fast hands, good jab, throws straight punches down the pipe. I think he hits hard. Good teep kicks, good calf kicks. I like that he checks leg kicks. He's, despite being small, he's strong for his size. He gets on your hips. He can slam you. He's a good wrestler. I go back to like Contender Series where he was throwing around Jimmy Lawson, a former Penn State University wrestler. Some body lock takedowns. He will shoot through your hips, some good ground and pound. And even though he looked like he was, the last fight went 15 minutes and he looked like he was getting tired, he was still landing takedowns and ground and pound, in the 15th minute. I think he mauls Chase Sherman. I'm not on the fence at all. I think he's better than Chase Sherman everywhere. I think he's gonna beat him up on the feet. I think he's gonna pick him up. I think he's gonna pick Chase Sherman up over his head and slam him because he likes to do that. He likes picking guys up in the air. I think he's gonna pick Chase Sherman up in the air and slam him.
Did Romanov do that? Like, was Romanov's takedown on Chase Sherman?
I try to I try to block out every single thing about Chase Sherman in my head.
Yeah. So, okay. He did kind of a medium thing, and then when Sherman got back up, Romanov gave him the full ride, the full suplex.
He might get suplex again.
All right.
That's what we're hoping. That's all. Let's root for Carl Williams to pick Chase Sherman up in the air, whether it be a suplex, whether it just be like a double. That's what I'm rooting for. That's my prediction. I'm going to say he picks up, he slams Chase Sherman, then finishes him with ground and pound. I'll say second round TKO.
Next up at UFC 287, it is back to the strawweight division for a matchup between Michelle Waterson-Gomez and Luana Pinheiro. Waterson-Gomez, the 37-year-old Colorado-born fighter fighting out of New Mexico, is 18-10 overall. She is an even 6-6 in the UFC since coming to the promotion as a former atomweight champ in Invicta. So 500, despite not really having the best weight class for her to compete in. However, she's been on a rough run of late. She's lost 4 of her last 5, going all the way back to 2019, and is currently on a 2-fight losing streak, those being a unanimous decision loss to Marina Rodriguez, in May of 2021 in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 24. And in her return last July, a second round submission loss to Amanda Lemos. That was at UFC on ABC, Ortega versus Rodriguez. So she'll be looking to get back in the win column. Standing in her way will be Pinheiro. The 29-year-old Brazilian is 10-1 overall. She is 2-0 since joining the UFC out of the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. She won her debut in not really controversial, but strange fashion, as Randa Marcos was disqualified for an illegal upkick late in the first round of their fight. That was back in May of 2021. She came back in November of that year and took a unanimous decision over Sam Hughes. That was at UFC Fight Night Vieira versus Tate. Pinheiro had been scheduled to fight last April against Jessica Penne. Penne was forced out of that fight, and when Penne was ready to fight again, they went ahead and booked her against somebody else. So Pinheiro's been on the shelf for quite a while, but she does come in on the strength of 2 straight wins in the UFC and 8 straight wins overall, and she is a moderate favorite to keep that streak going, as she is minus 160 right now. Waterson-Gomez plus 140. Keith? Michelle Waterson, now Waterson-Gomez's entire UFC run has been a case of her either getting it done or not getting it done against women who are generally a good bit bigger than she is, sometimes in surprising fashion. I mean, we've seen her kind of push around and out wrestle much bigger women, but it seems like time and the division have caught up with her, as she's lost 4 of 5 and she's not favored to win it here against Pinheiro. Does she get it done? If so, how?
Yeah, the one argument I'd make for Michelle Waterson-Gomez is that, like, she's lost to studs. Like, there's not a loss on a record that's bad, or at least recently. I'm talking about regional scene losses 10, 12 years ago. I mean, her UFC losses. I mean, Rose Namajunas, Tisha Torres, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Carlos Esparza, Marina Rodriguez, and Amanda Lemos. Like, all
top 5, if not top 3 fighters.
Even her wins, Angela Magana, Paige Van Zandt, not the best wins. I mean, the Paige Van Zandt win at the time seemed much bigger than it, didn't age well. But then after that, I guess Courtney Casey isn't that great of a win, but Felice Harris, solid win. Karolina Kovacevic, Angela Hill, like, those are solid wins.
Yeah.
Waterson, it's tough to kind of figure out what you're going to get from her, because she has been pretty inactive. I mean, I know it's been almost a year since she last stepped in the cage. It was like a year before that one. She hasn't won a fight since 2020.
Yeah.
So you're getting close to 3 years now since she's won a fight. So it's kind of hard to, figure out what you guess. You kind of have to base on what you last seen. She's got good footwork. Despite being small, she wants to fight from distance. She likes using that, she wants to be either all the way in or all the way out. She never wants to be in that pocket, which is kind of strange for a shorter, smaller fighter. She likes her best friend Holly Holm's sidekick to keep distance. She likes to dart in and out, land shots, and then use her speed to get up, before she gets countered. She likes to play a little bit of like cat and mouse game, kind of have you chase her, and then kind of she's stopping a dime and you run into one of her shots, or she crashes inside. She's got, I'd say, a great kicking game. She likes well, I shouldn't say great. It's a unique kicking game. Definitely like a more of a her name is the Karate Hottie, so it's definitely a karate style to it, where it's like hook kicks and oblique kicks, and it's not your traditional Muay Thai, hard teep kicks up the middle, hard calf kicks. It's more Stephen Thompson hook kick stuff. Despite being very undersized, she's strong in the clinch. I mean, she beat up Karolina Kovacevic. She beat up Felice Herrig in the clinch. She had success against Joanna Jędrzejczyk in the clinch, which was really impressive. She has a judo background, so she gets inside, looks for trips. She loves that stupid head and arm throw, but she's one of the people who's actually very good at it. So I still hate it, but she likes it. Strong top game, great back takes. I mean, she took the back on Joanna Jędrzejczyk in that fight, but she's 37, so 37 who's inactive. So it wouldn't be shocked if she looks terrible. because, long layoffs later on in your career is not a good idea. Now, Pinheiro, I think she should be undefeated. I'm going to keep saying this until she actually loses the fight that I think she should have lost. The one loss she has, I thought she won that fight. She's a great athlete. She moves really well. Good footwork. She's well-rounded. She darts in and out of range really well. Fast hands. She's solid in that mid-range striking too. Plus power, good volume. She sets up her clinch, get into the clinch where, she uses her striking, kind of gets you to come up, and then she comes inside, grabs the clinch. Good dirty boxing, crazy judo throws. She loves being in there. She'll give up her back going for throws, which I don't like. But I mean, you go back to the Brandon Marcos fight, and I know that's a controversial one the way it ended, but she was throwing around Marcos before that. That's one thing people forget. She's good at winning scrambles. She's a legit submission threat. One concern is she did kind of slow down and gas out late against Sam Hughes in a fight that she was, winning pretty easily. I feel like this is a passing of the torch kind of fight where Pinheiro is bigger than her. I think she might actually initiate the wrestling to get past Waterson's kicks. Waterson is a very underrated grappler, but I think I would still favor Pinheiro in the wrestling. I think she banks 2 rounds, just being bigger, winning the grappling exchanges. And then I think she holds off a late start from Waterson and she wins a decision. So give me Pinheiro by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. Unless something really strange has happened to Pinheiro in the, 18 or so months she's been off. The matchup really favors her here. I like, we've joked before on these shows that Waterson's nickname is the karate hottie, but at the UFC level, she's more like the clinch and wrestling hottie. She is capable of spectacular kicks. She just doesn't get to or doesn't choose to unveil them very often in the UFC. Open workouts, Michelle Waterson is breathtaking and spectacular. Right up there with her.
She's pretty breathtaking with not open workouts either.
Okay, but two different kinds of breathtaking, but yes, she's breathtaking at open workouts in the same way her longtime Jackson Wink teammate John Dodson is, where you see things in
who's also breathtaking outside the cage too.
Yeah. Where you see things that look like they belong in an action movie, if not a cartoon, but then rarely, if ever, are unleashed in the cage just because it's not practical. It's extremely admirable that she's found a way to keep winning, even though the UFC basically drafted her to help build a division that is not her best division. And there's a good chance she would have moved up to 115 by now anyway, just through the process of going from 30 to 37, having children, but probably robbed her of some years of contention at 105. Nonetheless, a very admirable career she's had. We're definitely on the tail end of it. And 115 is a division where speed does kill. If that top gear is slipped at all, that's going to cost her in this fight. More important than that is that her approach is not going to work well on Pinheiro. The head and arm throw that she's one of about 3 people in the UFC who make it work consistently is not going to work on a former Brazilian national judo champion. It's just not. And if she tries it, she's going for a ride.
Is the national Brazilian judo better than the Kentucky Judo Federation?
They've never had a dual meet.
No, so that's what we need. But give the people what we want.
If the dual meet took place in Brazil, I guess the Kentucky Judo Federation would not have to buy tickets back because they would be flying through the air. Pinheiro, a lot of the same questions, unless there's something that has compromised her physicality or kept her from training regularly during this time off, I think she kind of takes Gomez to the woodshed here. Just the stuff that Michelle Waterson-Gomez does isn't like Pinheiro's not going to let her do it. And it's not going to work. Give me Pinheiro to win all 3 rounds here. And I do agree that she slowed down late in the Hughes fight, but Hughes is bigger than Waterson-Gomez by a lot and was a pretty resisting foe, even though she definitely lost that fight. We may find out about Pinheiro that she has plenty of gas to go 15 minutes if she's completely dictating the action. And I think that's going to be what we get here. Give me Pinheiro to win all 3 rounds. And I agree, it'll be a bit of a passing of the torch moment. Next up at UFC 287, and at least as the card is currently constituted, the top prelim is a middleweight matchup between Chris Curtis and Kelvin Gastelum. Curtis, the 35-year-old Ohio native, is 30-9 overall. He is 4-1 since joining the UFC in late 2021. He rattled off 3 straight wins over Phil Hawes, Brendan Allen, and Rodolfo Vieira to mint himself one of the most surprising, debuting fighters in the UFC in the last few years. That fun came to an end against Jack Hermanson in a fight that could have propelled Curtis actually into the title picture, however briefly. He dropped a unanimous decision there. That was last July. Came back in December at UFC 282, got back on the winning track with a second round knockout of Joaquin Buckley. So he's going to look to make it 2 in a row and put a pretty notable name on his resume in the form of Gastelum. The winner of the 17th season of The Ultimate Fighter is somehow still just 31 years old, despite, well, I guess he's been in the UFC for literally a decade because he was like 21 or 22 when he won the show. So that adds up. He is 16-8 with 1 no contest overall, 11-8 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He, of course, experimented with welterweight and welterweight plus early in his UFC run, was more or less forced up to middleweight after blowing weight. He is 4-6 with 1 no contest since moving up to middleweight. And he is in the middle of a rough patch. He has lost 5 of 6. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He lost twice in 2021, which is the last year we saw him. Dropped unanimous decisions to Robert Whittaker and Jared Cannonier. Obviously, those were top fighters at the time and remain so now, but he has been out ever since then. So 17 months away due to 2 injury withdrawals on his part. He's been injured multiple times. So while he is just 31, he may be starting to look like a 31-year-old with a significant amount of tread off the tires. Nonetheless, despite the dismal recent record, despite the long layoff due to injuries on his part, he is a slight favorite here. This is the closest fight on the card in terms of the odds as of the beginning of fight week. But right now, Gastelum is -130, Curtis +110. Keith, these guys are kind of meeting in the middle. I've said multiple times that Curtis is a guy that I figured we'd never see in the UFC, just a real fun regional journeyman. And it sounds terrible to say that. It's not meant to be insulting, but it was meant as what I thought was high praise for him at the time. I mean, I saw him lose twice and retire twice in one night at PFL back in 2019, and I figured that was the last we'd see of him, maybe period, and certainly in any kind of major promotion. And instead, he's here. He's on the outskirts of the rankings. He's a hell of a success story by any measure. And on the other side, you've got Gastelum, who in some ways feels like he should have accomplished more by now. And in other ways, things have fallen apart so completely that you wonder how much of it is smoke and mirrors. There's a little of the same dynamic as there is with Michelle Waterson-Gomez, whom we just talked about, where, yeah, he's 1-5 in his last 6, but none of the losses were to chumps. They were all to top 10 fighters. Most of them were to top 5 fighters.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole ball started rolling downhill with a loss to Israel Adesanya for an interim title. And it was, like we said at the time, about as tough a fight as anyone had given Adesanya in his entire career. How much does Kelvin Gastelum have left in the tank? Does the move to fight ready, which is clearly, a really solid camp of the last couple of years, does it give you any more hope for him? And how do you feel about him in this fight with Curtis?
Kelvin Gastelum might be the oldest 31-year-old since, like, I don't know, the 1800s, and people were dying in gun battles and
that or the Olsen twins. Like, okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
good call. You're talking about Kelvin Gastelum. One thing I loved you said, you're like, oh, he doesn't feel as he has accomplished as much as he liked at 31 years old. It's like, yes, fill in every other 31-year-old on the planet. Yeah.
And also, could you come up with a more stereotypical description of a 31-year-old who smokes weed?
Yeah. But I'm looking at Gastelum's record, and it's like, talk about like a who's who Like go back from the Jake Ellenberger, which was 2014, so pretty much a decade now. Let me read you the list of opponents he's faced since Ellenberger. So Jake Ellenberger, Tyron Woodley, Nate Marquardt, Neil Magny, Johnny Hendricks, Tim Kennedy, Vitor Belfort, Chris Weidman, Michael Bisping, Jacare Sousa, Israel Adesanya, Darren Till, Jack Hermanson, Ian Heinisch, Robert Whitaker, Jared Cannonier. Holy Christ. I mean, who's the easiest guy on that list? Ian Heinisch, who was like a top 12 ranked guy at the time.
Yeah, like Heinisch was favored, and Heinisch was on the outskirts of the rankings. In hindsight, it's probably Bisping, who shouldn't have been fighting 3 weeks after getting beaten up by George St. Pierre.
Who was the champion 3 weeks earlier?
Yeah, who had been champion
in the
3
division.
weeks. Yeah,
the easiest guy he's faced in a decade was a champion in the division 3 weeks before he faced him. I mean, here's the guys that he's been scheduled against that the fight fell through. Matt Brown, Jorge Masvidal, Donald Cerrone, Anderson Silva, Emivov, and Duplessis.
And it's worth mentioning the one no contest in the middle of this streak. It was him beating the shit out of Vitor Belfort in about 4 minutes. It got overturned because Belfort popped for steroids and Gastelum popped for weed. Like
you can't go like, yeah, you know what? Like
those should at least cancel out.
Yeah, like offsetting penalties. Like,
yeah.
Can I go? This is way off topic.
Go for it.
This is just like every time I watch the NFL, I've always hated this. If one team commits a 5-yard penalty and another team on the same play commits like a 15-yard penalty, shouldn't be a 10-yard penalty for the one team, like B minus.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, there's like a 40-yard penalty down the play, but they had a 5-yard penalty. Like, okay, so mark
one team's offside, the other team roughs the kicker,
yeah. Anyways, that's the chance where like if the offense moves and you're like, oh shit, here's my chance to just absolutely like take a cheap shot at Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah,
just go for it. You know, do you really like? Yeah. If I was a defensive coordinator, I'd be like, yeah, well worth it. But like, we won't take the 5-yard penalty if you got a chance to like end Patrick Mahomes' game. Sure, go for it.
I'm with you, dude. Because
just for the record, I'm not saying to hurt an NFL player. I'm just
don't hurt NFL players. But the thing is, if Gastelum tests positive for cannabis and Belfort tests positive for steroids, like Gastelum's already being punished for using weed. His penalty for using weed is fighting at 185. Otherwise, he'd be the greatest welterweight of all time right now.
Yeah, I know. That's the other thing. We talk about that record, and he's like a foot shorter than every guy he fought against.
Yeah, like it takes away from the fact that Gastelum versus Curtis is like probably the shortest matchup they can make in this division now that Deron Wynn is gone. Like, yeah, Kelvin Gastelum.
I just imagine Deron Wynn not fighting the MMA right now, just being like just looking like Chris Barnett, just same height, same body right now.
Yeah, probably. Maybe he grows his hair out a little bit, gets like that, that.
All right, so back to the actual fight, because this is actually one of the fights on the card.
No. Well, one more thing. Like, if Wynn is smart right now, he's just getting some like really tight button-up shirts and going around trying to do wrestling clinics and saying he's Daniel Cormier.
There you go. There you go. So everything I'm going to say about Gastelum is what I said about him when he was going to fight Imavov, and then it didn't happen. They already broke him down. So this is the same exact notes. His inactivity is tough to gauge because he's been out for a long time. His motivation is always very questionable. But in fairness, I actually thought he beat Cannonier. I know I'm in the minority, but it was a very close fight. He's very inconsistent. Like, we've seen him be very good at times and then look very weak at times. He has a lot of main event experience, so he's got a lot of, not that I don't think, he's had bigger fight experience than Chris Curtis, but Chris Curtis has like so much experience too. So like, I don't think that matters in this fight. Just something that was in my notes.
Their actual cage time is probably about the same, even though like Curtis has twice as many fights.
Yeah, probably because the amount of like main event fights Gastelum had too. Gastelum's southpaw, he moves really well. He's got good hand speed, kind of fights and bursts, takes long moments off and then explodes. He sets up his shots well with feints. He's got a great overhand left, though he can kind of overextend at times. He hits hard, though I've said this plenty of times, I think they exaggerate how hard he hits. He does step into his punches, and that's what generates lots of power. He can make the mistake of reaching for his shots. He's also been gun shy at times. Like I go back to like the Darren Till fight. Like for some reason, he was really gun shy against Darren Till. And he didn't check any leg kicks. Darren Till chewed up his legs. He can wrestle, but hardly ever uses it. He has a rock solid chin, though. I mean, he's got hit by some hard hitters. I mean, I think Israel Adesanya is as good as a striker there ever is in the UFC. Jacare, we always talk about his wrestling and his grappling, but the guy hits like a tank.
Dude, Tyron Woodley at 170 is one of the hardest one-shot punchers.
Especially at that time. Tyron Woodley, I mean, Robert Whitaker, another guy in the division. He's not known for his power, but another really good striker. And he's shown that he can go 5 rounds. Not that this is 5 round fight, but he can go deep into a fight without an issue. The one thing I hate about Chris Curtis is that he's 35. Like that really bothers me. He is also an undersized middleweight, as he spent a lot of time, in the regional scene fighting at welterweight. He's a southpaw that is a boxer. He's a counter striker. He likes to get in the pocket and throw down there. He marches down his foe. Struggles to cutting off the cage though. Like he follows and he struggles with a lot of movement. Like that's where he was trying to catch up to Jack Hermanson most of the fight. I also dislike that he gives away rounds. And what I mean by that, like go back to his last fight. Yeah, he knocked out Joaquin Buckley, which obviously was spectacular. But he gave away the first round against Joaquin Buckley. Just by simply not throwing enough. When he lets his hands rip, I mean, it's nice. I mean, he keeps everything nice and tight. She's got some short, tight hooks, good uppercuts. He'll smash the body. He's really like having this late career burst in power. Like I'd always say he was a big hitter, but there's something now that's just, man, like he's knocking guys stiff. I mean, he did it to Phil Halls, he did it to Brandon Allen, he did it to Joaquin Buckley. He doesn't throw kicks. It's like just not a part of his game. He also has a very boxing defense. What I mean, like he likes to roll with punches and stuff, which I always think looks worse. Even if they're not landing, it just looks worse. He can wrestle, but he doesn't look for takedowns enough. If he does wrestle, he's got a good top game. He showed some really good takedown defense against Rodolfo Vieira. And we've seen him go hard. Like he won't slow down in a 15-minute fight because he doesn't really waste energy. So I'm not surprised that this is one of the closest lines. I think it's one of the hardest ones to pick. If you asked me 5 years ago, I would have laughed at this. I would have taken Gastelum by murder. I really want to pick Chris Curtis, and I originally wrote down Chris Curtis as my pick, and I've changed it to Gastelum. I'm always concerned with the output of Chris Curtis. And being that this is only a 3-round fight, if you give away 2 rounds, you have to chase the knockout. And Gastelum has the better output, and he's faced some really good strikers and showed that he has durability. Again, I'm not betting on this fight or anything like that because I definitely don't have any confidence in Gastelum at this point. But I think he wins some early rounds and holds on to a decision. I'm going to say he wins a split decision. I think it's going to be really close, but I'll take Kelvin Gastelum.
Yeah, this is, for me, also probably the hardest fight on the card to call. That's reflected in the odds. It's apparently the hardest one for the bettors to call. There's something I've come to realize about myself, and if you've followed the show for a long time, you may just, like, a light bulb may go off over your head. As Keith says multiple times per show, we're not a betting show. We mention the odds because they're part of the story, and we know that there are bettors that use us as part of their matrix. They think of us as handicappers. I feel so flattered, but I always fade fighters coming in off a long layoff, especially if it's due to injury or illness. But no matter what the reason is, like in football, there are there are certain axioms like, you take the double-digit dog at home, things like that. For me, if one fighter's been off for, more than 15 months, especially if they've been scheduled for fights and withdrawn from them due to injury, it's hard for me to take them as a favorite. And this is another one of those for me. And it feels weird to say this when one fighter is 35 and is closer to 36 than Gastelum is to 32. But Gastelum is the guy I'm more worried is going to look significantly diminished from the last time I saw him in a cage. He is a guy that I agree with Keith. He has an incredible chin, but I'm worried that any fight now is going to be the time when that abandons him. At 185, despite just kind of looking like a medium fit former college wrestler, got a little bit of a spare tire. He's always been surprisingly fast and nimble. His reach has rarely ever given him a problem just because he's so good at getting into range and landing cleanly on people. I mean, he hit Israel Adesanya more times cleanly than all of Adesanya's other UFC opponents put together up to that point. And a little of it was the threat of the takedown, but I mean, Adesanya had to know Gastelum wasn't really going to take him down even by that point. Gastelum's really quick. Any fight now could be where that really starts to abandon him. His proven gas tank, which his gas tank was dicey at 170. It's always been solid at 185 with 17 months off, even being at Fight Ready, which is obviously just a fantastic camp and has specifically been a good camp at getting fighters with weight issues looking good on the scale and good in the cage. I mean, this may be where that starts to slip. All the unknowns for me skew Curtis's way, despite Curtis being the older fighter here. I'm not going to be comfortable with it until the final horn sounds and they read the scorecards, because they're going to be individually hard to score rounds. But give me Curtis to pick up 2 out of 3 and squeak out of here with the decision and the mild upset. One last question for you about this one, because it's something admirable that I've noticed about Gastelum. And you asked early in this segment, what's the easy fight in this ridiculous string of foes that Gastelum has fought over the last 9 years? In Gastelum's entire UFC career, who's beaten him the worst? I mean, Jack Hermanson basically caught him slipping mentally and heel hooked him effortlessly in like a minute, but who really beat him the worst?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious pick is Hermanson, but someone who beat him up. I
mean, Weidman finished
Weidman,
him,
I guess.
But it had been...
Weidman almost got knocked out in like the first round.
Yeah, and like Weidman, like that's what I'm saying. He's been in there with all of these guys. Yeah. Weidman, he hurt Weidman pretty bad early on. Weidman tapped him out in the third round. Weidman is a crushingly heavy top position grappler. Like
maybe Whitaker, because he didn't have moments against Whitaker. I mean, it was a decision. It wasn't like the greatest fight, but he didn't really have moments against Whitaker, and it was like a clear decision for Whitaker.
I think that's fair. He looked outclassed against Whitaker.
The point is, but he wasn't like thrashed. Yeah, no, nobody thrashes Kelvin Gastelum.
Yeah, and I don't think Curtis is going to here either. But yeah, I think he'll do enough to get his hand raised. We'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, if Chris Curtis starches Kelvin Gastelum, like enough of this being on the prelims things, like he needs to be in like a fight night main event.
Yeah. The UFC 287 main card kicks off with a bantamweight matchup between Raul Rosas Jr. and Christian Rodriguez. Rosas, the 18-year-old Californian by way of Las Vegas, youngest fighter in the UFC, easily and by far, though who knows how long that'll be the case, since his younger brother just picked up like a 12-second knockout this past week in a regional promotion and is clearly going to get an early look from the UFC just because of the family relationship. At any rate, the 18-year-old who just turned 18 in October, like he's barely 18 and a half, 7-0 in his mixed martial arts career. 1-0 since winning his way into the promotion on the Contender Series last September. He made his UFC debut at UFC 282 last December, put Jay Perrin away with a first-round rear naked choke, turned face crank. Looked extremely painful. At any rate, looking to make it 2 in a row, looking to go 8-0 in his career, looking to keep the hype going and to continue to justify it. Looking to stop him will be Rodriguez. The 25-year-old Wisconsinite is 8-1 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of the 2021 Contender Series. He won back in 2021, was not immediately signed. He went and won one more fight in the regionals, then was signed to fight Jonathan Pierce last February, dropped a unanimous decision, came back in October at UFC Fight Night, Cater versus Allen, and choked out Josh Weems in the first round with an anaconda choke. So he's looking to keep his own good vibes going. He is not favored to do so. Rosas Jr. is minus 230 right now on most of your major books. Rodriguez plus 190 as the underdog. Keith, Raul Rosas Jr. is not a complete fighter. Obviously, he's 18 years old. He's not Shavkat Rakhmonov. He's gonna take a loss at some. Even if he's a future champ, he's gonna take a loss at some point here. Just especially in the 135-pound division, there are some grown-ass men in that division that are waiting to make him pay for his mistakes. The question in front of us right now is Christian Rodriguez the one to do it? The big question I have every time I see Raul Rosas Jr. fight is how long can this guy continue to make bantamweight? Because he's 18 and he is huge for the division. I mean, he may not be the tallest guy, but I mean, he's 5'9", and he's built differently. He's not tall and skinny like Rob Font. He's got muscle on his frame that makes me think that he may be subjecting himself to a weight cut that the 21-year-old or 25-year-old version of himself may not be able to make anymore. Like, any agreement there? Do you think that's
no? He's a big guy, but the crazy thing is, you said like 21-year-old could not make it, which very well could be the case, and probably likely is the case too. As guys get older.
Yeah.
21. If he stays active and doesn't have an injury thing, he could have 10 fights in the UFC by then. Before he turns 21. And honestly, like we talk about, he could go on a run and win the title before he turns 21, and then move up.
Yeah, and isn't it wild?
I'm not predicting that or anything like that because
No.
he's 18, but
he's 18. What I see when I look at him is he is a standout athlete. He's extremely strong. He's pretty fast. He's coordinated. He's already a very, very good grappler, and he's clearly being trained and schooled well as a striker, but it's not like it's definitely not taking as quickly as the grappling is. Like his striking still looks like a work in progress, and he may be one of those guys that
he's 18.
He's 18.
Everything like a work in progress.
Yeah, like he may well have been grappling since he was 5 years old. I hope he was not getting kicked in the head since he was 5 years old. So it makes sense that he would have started later. And who knows if that'll click fully. But even his grappling, it lacks a certain patience. Like I worry that he's gonna either like gas out or make a mistake when he starts running into people that he can't just kind of do whatever he wants to on the ground. I thought the Mando Gutierrez fight on the Contender Series was actually kind of good cage time for him for that, because he was winning the entire fight, but couldn't put Gutierrez away. So he kind of had to go through just more live fire situations on the ground with a resisting opponent. But there's going to be a whole different level of that here in the UFC. So as far as the undefeated Raul Rosas Jr., I'm waiting to see him against a sharper striker, maybe somebody with fight-changing power who isn't a total dummy on the ground, who will be able to get back up or make him work or last till the end of a round and get a fresh start on the feet the next round. The real question for me is whether Rodriguez is that. And he seems to check most of the boxes, honestly. He's a well-rounded guy. He himself is pretty big for the division. But the way he lost to Jonathan Pierce, I think I think Rosas is going to be able to do the same thing to him. Give me Raul Rosas Jr. here to win a decision, but where he's probably able to get the fight to the ground when he wants to, and is probably pretty dominant once he gets there. Like, I'm not going to pick him to get the sub because Rodriguez is himself a very good grappler. But yeah, give me give me Raul Rosas Jr. to make the most of a pretty sensible style matchup and a pretty sensible competitive matchup for a second UFC fight. Stay undefeated, keep the hype going, but still leave some questions unanswered.
So my only question is, why didn't they book him against Guido Canetti? Like, why can't you got to get the oldest guy in the division and the youngest guy in the division?
That's an incredible idea. Would that be the first time in the UFC we had someone who was twice his opponent's age? I'm sure it would be.
Yeah, it has to be.
Because Canetti's 41.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Was like, how old was like Ron Van Cleef when he fought Royce Gracie? Oh, he's like in his 50s and stuff.
He was like 50, but
yeah,
that was UFC 2. So Royce was like already like 28 or 29. Yeah. No, I'd have to be like, okay, who was Arlovsky fought or who was Olenek fought? And Olenek's been close because he was like 44 and fighting dudes that were like 26. True. But yeah. Oh, what a brilliant idea.
I should just run the UFC. That's just,
you should be the matchmaker.
I just have brilliant ideas.
Yeah.
Let me say this about Rojas. I see people, I mean, he draws so much attention on social media based on, his story, 18 years old. I had an issue with him being like a contender series at 17 years old. Just something in my spirit. No, this is a terrible topic, but Victoria Lee, like I did an interview with Victoria Lee when she was 16, and I said it right to her, like, I don't know how I felt about watching a 16-year-old fight in a professional MMA fight. Like, you should be 18. I'm sorry, but whatever, it happened. But the thing about Rojas, how you feel about him, I'm amazed at how many people will say, like, oh, this guy will never be a champion. The kid's 18. Like, you can't judge anything he's doing right now, what skills he has, what skills he doesn't have. It's just a complete out. If you want to say you want to predict that he'll be a champion, like, I think that's a little like the other way extreme, but not as bad because the kid's 18, so obviously the sky's the limit. But saying, oh, he'll never be a champion because his striking's this or that, or that's just stupid. It's like, that's so stupid. Like, I'd be like looking at an 11-year-old and be like, oh, I think I'll never be a champion in the UFC. Like, he's a kid. I was getting into it with not getting into it. I was discussing on a guy on Twitter. I'll give him a shout out. Colin Crandall. He's a fantastic dude. He's MMA Power Hours is his website and his show. And he was saying how, he thought Gastelum and Curtis should be on the main card instead of this one. And I totally get it. Like, based on merit, of course they should be. But, I was explaining why I thought Rojas should be on the card. And the fact that, I mean, just plain and simple, he's a big story. Like, that's just what it comes out. He's a bigger story. He'll draw more eyeballs. I don't think anybody's ordering the pay-per-view, because the 18-year-old kid's on it. Like, the casual fan is ordering the pay-per-view because of Adesanya, Pyfer, and Masvidal and stuff. But when you're hanging out with your friends, you're talking, the casual fan talks over even the main card fights until they recognize someone like, oh, then they want to pay attention. They want to pay attention to the 18-year-old. Yeah. Gastelum and Curtis will fight each other and they're talking over it. Not us, not hardcores, but I would say the casuals.
Sure.
So, anyways, Colin Crandall's a fantastic dude. We haven't done a quick story time with Keith for a second.
Sure.
Colin Crandall is the nicest guy to meet. Like, there's people, he might not be just the nicest guy to meet. He's just like, he might be the nicest guy on the planet Earth. So he came to Boston for a UFC years ago, and I was there, and another guy I know was there, this Corey Garfield, another great dude. And Colin just kept saying, like, hey, there's one story I can't tell because it's embarrassing, but Colin just kept saying, like, dude, when I get there, I'm taking you guys out. I want to treat you. Dinner's on me. I'm like, I say to him like, dinner. You don't think about dinner? Like, we go out to dinner, but like, you don't have to take me out. He's just saying, yeah, no, we want to go. So finally, we found this like hole in the wall place, and he's like, all right, guys, I got everything. He's like, all right, well, I'll take salads. We'll all take soups. He orders it for the whole table. And then he just starts, he's like, you guys want to share some appetizers? Like, we'll share some appetizers. He orders like every appetizer there is. He's like, we'll get an onion ring. We'll get a French fry. You guys like, you guys like potato skins? We'll get some potato skins. We'll get some mozzarella. So he's like, all right, we'll all get big grinders. He starts ordering grind. He finally, the lady says no to him. She goes, no, that's too much food. Good. The amount of food that came out, you would have thought it was the first Thanksgiving with the Pilgrims and Indians. The amount of food that came out. I'm like, and then like I feel so bad because he's paying for all this stuff that I'm like trying to eat as much as possible. I'm like, my stomach's hurting. Colin Crandall is the nicest. He kept taking Uber everywhere, and he just like that talking full conversation with every single Uber person there was. Like sit together, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? Oh, he's you do this on the side? Oh, you just full time? What's the deal? You just have this whole conversation. Is going. This is Boston. The people aren't friendly in the Northeast, but Colin is a fantastic dude. Anyways,
that's amazing.
Yeah, to this fight. Rojas, the thing that stands out to me is how good of an athlete he is. He's very physically strong for someone who he's not in his prime years yet. On the feet, he's an aggressive striker. He can fight out of both stances, but he's wild. He's a brawler on the feet. He throws a lot of kicks. He likes flying attacks. He goes Superman punches and flying knees and stuff. A lot of that is to close the distance. When he shoots, he's got a great penetration step. Strong top game, advances really well on the ground. He's a strong grappler, good back takes, mean ground and pound. He's a serious submission threat. I mean, he almost got a Sioux left stretch, in the UFC. He does chase submissions if it isn't there, which I don't like. And he also isn't a great defensive wrestler. I've seen him get taken down, but he's at 18. Like he could be like all these things I said. Like he isn't a good defensive wrestler. He could have incredible balance by his next fight. No idea. Christian Rodriguez, definitely a lower level UFC talent. This is the right guy for Rojas to be fighting in his second UFC as this young. Minus athlete. He's a boxer with a high guard defense, marches forward, high output on the feet, but he's kind of slow. I mean, he throws hard. Like his overhand right was hurting Stephen Pierce several times. He's got some good step-in elbows. He does target the body, which I like, but he's a weak defensive wrestler, not good at winning scrambles. He does like to go for the guillotine. He almost caught Jonathan Pierce in the guillotine. He also subbed Joshua Williams in an Anaconda choke, which I like. So he has 4 submission wins on his record. He also has good cardio. Like he was going hard against Stephen Pierce in a third round of a fight that he took on days' notice. So this is a proper test for Rodriguez. I think Rojas passes with flying colors. I think he finds a way to get the fight to the ground. I think he locks in a submission too. And I'll see he does in the second round. Give me Rojas by second round submission. The one thing I just pray, like if you're on Twitter and stuff, don't like be calling for the UFC to don't be calling for Rojas to fight a ranked fighter next time. He's 18. For the next 2 years, he should be fighting all low level UFC talent.
Yeah. He's 18 and there is no reason to rush him. He is in what may be the hardest division in the UFC to break into the top 15. If not, it's in the top 3. Like it's right up there.
Yeah, like Rodriguez might be too high of a test. Like he might. You can make an argument for someone lower than that. And
if he loses to Rodriguez, people will jump off ship because we all know that this is magical.
He's a bomb. He's a bomb, and all this.
I mean, we're on record as saying we think it's too soon, even if he wins. So that won't change. Just
won't change. But win or lose, like if he wins, I'll feel better about him. But if he loses, like I'm not gonna.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it turns out that he just has no chin at all, and some off balance jab just drops him Kimbo Slice. But other than that, yeah. The UFC 287 main card powers on with a welterweight matchup between Kevin Holland and Santiago Ponzinibbio. Holland, the 30-year-old, is 23-9 with 1 no contest overall. He is 10-6 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is 2-1 at welterweight. Made the decision to drop to welterweight a little over a year ago, and he has wins over Alex Oliveira and Tim Means, then a quick first-round submission loss to Khamzat Chimaev in the makeshift co-main event of UFC 279, which ended up getting contested at, I think it was 180 pounds, something like that. All that last-second mix-up that happened because Chimaev blew weight so badly, Holland ended up on the receiving end of a first-round submission loss there. At any rate, came back at 170 in December and lost via TKO after the 4th round against Stephen Thompson in what had up to that point been an absolutely sensational battle and a late candidate for fight of the year. But nonetheless, Holland does find himself on a 2-fight losing streak, the second such of his UFC career. He would like very much not to make it 3. And looking to foil him in that regard is Ponzinibbio, who just avoided going on a 3-fight losing streak of his own. The 36-year-old Argentinian is 11-5 in the UFC, 29-6 overall. He is 2-3 since returning from a long injury layoff in 2021. He lost to Li Jingliang, beat Miguel Baeza, then lost back-to-back split decisions against Jeff Neal and Michel Pereira coming into UFC 282 last December, where he had been scheduled to fight Robbie Lawler. Lawler withdrew at the last minute, like on fight week, if not like weigh-in day. Alex Morono stepped in on the shortest of short notice and was well on his way to beating Ponzinibbio before Ponzinibbio caught him, hurt him, finished him halfway through the 3rd round. So Ponzinibbio avoids the 3-fight losing streak, would like to begin a winning streak. He is not favored to do so here. Holland is minus 245, Ponzinibbio plus 205. Keith, I understand why the line here is what it is, because I'm one of what sounds like a minority, and definitely a minority in Houston, that is fine with the Ponzinibbio stoppage over Morono. I mean, like the way Morono looked, just like by the eyeball test, if I were the ref, I would have jumped in there too, because he looked dead, even though it turned out that some of that was whatever the equivalent of a dead leg is for your face. Like, you know, Ponzinibbio just hit that nerve that basically made it look like Alex had a stroke. So yeah, that and 2 more glancing blows, and I'm calling the ambulance. So I get that, but fact remains that Ponzinibbio was really close to losing all 3 rounds to an unranked fighter who stepped in on like 48 hours notice. And I mean, that was a real fun fight, and most Morono fights are, but it did not sway me from my opinion before that fight that Ponzinibbio is looking increasingly shot. I mean, the same guy that had to kind of pull that win out of his hat against Morono, I think is going to get scorched by Kevin Holland. Holland, for most of 4 rounds, went tit for tat with Stephen Thompson, who's still one of the trickier strikers in the history of the sport to deal with. Holland has, like, I know it feels like some of the shine is off because he was such a sensation during 2020, that first year of COVID, where he fought like 5 times and really propelled himself into the spotlight. And he came up against the ceiling at 185 once he ran into people that could just take him down and wrestle him. But he's still, whatever ceiling he's hit, it's above Santiago Ponzinibbio's head. Yeah, he got thrashed by Hamzat Chimaev, who was a terrible style matchup for him. And then Thompson beat him in a way that Ponzinibbio is unlikely to be able to duplicate. Ponzinibbio, despite being 36 and an old 36, I mean, he's still got fast hands. He's still got a ton of power, but he's going to be at a reach disadvantage against Holland. His gas tank, I don't think, is what it was, even if he remains dangerous late into a fight. Like I don't think he's a builder anymore. If this goes to the ground, I think Holland actually has the advantages there. I think he's like an underrated grappler when he's not just being bullied from top position by a big middleweight. I expect Holland is going to kind of style on Ponzinibbio, and it'll be sad for that part of me that remembers Pons as one of the most exciting up-and-coming welterweight contenders 5 years ago, and kind of figured he would have made it to a title shot if not for all of his injuries and illnesses. But if you like Kevin Holland kind of styling and dancing and outstriking someone badly and saying something real funny on the mic afterwards, this is going to be your night. Give me Holland in a dominant decision here.
Yeah, I think Holland needs it too, though. Like, I definitely think there's some shine off of him, but you know, I mean, like Derek Lewis and saying funny things can last for a long time, but eventually you got to win too, you know, and he doesn't have like that marquee win. So this would be one of his better wins. You know, Holland, A lot of things I've always said about him. He's long and lengthy. He's a great athlete. He moves well. He's elusive. He's explosive. He does make the mistake of throwing from his hips. He's got fast hands. He's pretty accurate, strong jab, plus power, long and rangy kicks. He can blast a high kick. He's good at following his kicks to crash into the pocket and land shots. I've said this before, but one thing that always stands out is how quickly he closes distance due to his length. He just like takes one step and he's halfway across the cage. He uses his size well in the clinch. He likes like boxing the ears, which hurts a lot more than people think. He hits knees in the clinch so easily because of his length. Despite saying he doesn't ever want to fight wrestlers, he can wrestle a little bit himself. As you said, he isn't a wrestler, but he's gotten takedowns on like 5 UFC fights. He's a weak defensive wrestler, as he's been taken down in like pretty much every single fight. But he's worse is that he struggles to get back up. So I was impressed in the little moments against Chimaev where he was scrambling pretty well, including going for a Grammy roll. And he is a submission threat. I mean, he caught Tim Means in a beautiful Darce choke, but he was submitted by Chimaev himself. But like, Chimaev's special. Like, he really is. Like, people say what they want. Like, the guy's special. Yeah. Holland has a great chin. I mean, he's been blasted by some great strikers, just keep coming. But he isn't the smartest. For example, like you mentioned him going like tick for tack with Stephen Thompson. Like, why? Like, have you never seen Stephen Thompson fight? Like, you wrestle him and you win. And that's something that Holland should have done a lot more. Now, Ponzinibbio, he's a striker that used to be, you're right, it was all about volume. And, he wants to fight from range, set up his shots and traps. He uses feints well. DC pointed out in one of his fights that he does really well to win the foot battle, so his straight right is always lined up. He's explosive. His hands used to be very quick. I do think they're declining a bit. But I like that he attacks with combos when he does throw. Like, his left hook is his best punch. He's definitely a power puncher for the division. Hard calf kicks. He can wrestle himself. He got a takedown against Jeff Neal. He took down Michel Pereira, and those were like back-to-back fights. And he's insanely tough. Like, he'll eat some really big shots. I go back to like Pereira, where he eat some big shots and keep coming. But cardio used to be a major strength, and I don't think that's the case here. I think he's slowing down. Where I'm with you, man. It's hard to trust Holland at all because Holland will put himself in the worst positions possible. Like, stand in the pocket and just throw it down with Santiago Ponzinibbio would be the worst strategy, but I can see Holland doing that just because it seems like he wants to have fun and challenge himself more than he wants to win. But he's faster. I think he actually probably hits harder of the two right now. I see he works Pons with his speed and his range. Pons is super tough, so I don't know if he finishes him, and especially because I can see Holland hurting him and then smiling at him, like high-fiving him and stuff instead of just going in for the kill. So give me Holland by unanimous decision.
Third from the top on the UFC 287 main card is a bantamweight matchup between Rob Font and Adrian Yanez. Font, the 35-year-old Boston native, is 19-6 overall. He is 9-5 in the UFC. He does come into this fight off of a 2-fight losing streak, those being back-to-back unanimous decision losses to Jose Aldo and Marlon Vera in the main events of UFC on ESPN 31 and 35, respectively. The most recent of those, the Vera fight, was almost a full year ago. It was last April 30th. It's been a lengthy layoff for Font, perhaps recuperating from 2 5-round wars in which he got fairly battered. But nonetheless, he is back. And for the first time in 3 fights, not headlining a fight night. Instead, he is on one of the UFC's big pay-per-view cards of the year, and he gets to meet Yanez. The 29-year-old Houstonian is 16-3 overall. He's 5-0 since joining the UFC out of the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He knocked out Brady Wong in 40 seconds there. Then since getting to the UFC, has racked up wins over Victor Rodriguez, Gustavo Lopez, Randy Costa, Davey Grant, and Tony Kelly. Of those 5, Grant is the only one to make it to the final horn. They had a surprisingly fun scrap back in November of 2021. But in Yanez's only fight of last year at the UFC on ESPN Cater versus Emmett card, he put away Kelly late in the first round after just kind of boxing him up pretty soundly. Yanez is on a 9-fight winning streak overall, and after 5 straight in the UFC, has finally earned a legit top 10 opponent. Font is it, and Yanez is a moderate favorite to keep the good vibes going. He is minus 180, Font plus 155. Man, Keith, I'm going to toss this to you. I mean, it's a Boston fighter against a Houston fighter, so let's
do it. Come on, Rob Font, represent.
But you know what? We were just talking about Raul Rosas Jr. Adrian Yanez is a pretty good example of how hard it is to get a top 10 matchup in the UFC bantamweight division, because he's 5-0, 4 finishes, and the one fight that went to decision was a fight of the night, super exciting brawl with Davey Grant. Aside from that, he's dominated everybody. About the only thing he's done wrong is not be named Sean O'Malley. And this is what it's taken him.
Yeah, like you either have to have this incredible character like Sean O'Malley, and he definitely has the ability too, but or sometimes the guys who get the fast track are just the right place, right time. Like you take the call on short notice and you fight the guy who's ranked 15th in the world and you get a win, and now you're the 15th guy and stuff. That hasn't been the case with Giannis. He's taken the long road, and and so far it's been really good. And he's getting a tough guy like Rob Font. Now, Rob Font, he's a boxer that can fight out of both stances. He's like a stalking kind of plotter. Everything comes off a jab. Like jab is Rob Font's whole world. He sets up his right hand with his, using a lot of feints to distract and the jab to kind of blind, and then he throws that straight right. He attacks with combinations. He's a bit of a point fighter. He's not the hardest hitter for the division. He probably lacks power. Very boxing style where he has a high guard defense. He uses vision really well. Like he slips and stuff too. He understands range really well. He's good at slipping a punch and leave himself back in his reach. I love that he works to the body. Like he'll jab down to the body. He can wrestle a little bit. He'll shoot kind of into like body locks. I go back to it's been a long time now, but like his best wrestling performance was probably against Sergio Pettis, where he took him down a bunch of times. He took down Ricky Simone, which says a lot. He took down Cody Garbrandt, which is, say much more about Garbrandt. Getting takedowns on Garbrandt is a good thing. He took down Jose Aldo, which even old Jose Aldo is still pretty good. And even in a fight where he got trashed in Marlon Vera, he got a takedown. So I think there's something about Rob Font's game that doesn't get enough credit. He's a decent grappler. He's got 4 submission wins. He isn't a strong defensive wrestler. He's been taken down a lot in the UFC, and he'll jump guillotine, which makes it worse. But to his credit, he's hard to hold on. He does well to work back to his feet. Now, Giannis, very good striker, very poised, very relaxed. Almost too relaxed, where he gives away rounds. A little bit of a Jorge Masvidal, with this attitude: if I'm not getting hit, I'm not losing. Yeah. But when he lets his hands go, it really is a thing of beauty. Fast hands. I like that he just touches. He doesn't waste energy. Very accurate. He's good at wrapping punches around pillars, which could be very successful against a guy like Rob Font if he's not slipping, if he's doing more of a pillaring game. No tension in his arm, very relaxed. Good vision. He kind of sees everything coming at him. He's good at mixing up his rhythm and picking up his opponent's timing well. But that might be a little bit why he's a slow starter, because that's things he's looking for. Just kind of reading, kind of Anderson Silva style. But when he's slipping and ripping, it's good. He lands a lot of power shots, and he's a lot like Israel Adesanya, where you look at him and you don't think he's a big power puncher, but he lands so clean. That's what gets guys. Kind of similar to Adesanya. He can sneak a high kick in, which I like. He throws it in combination. He doesn't check leg kicks, and he's been surprisingly alert. Like I go back to the Randy Costa where Randy Costa was teeing off on him early in that fight, which definitely did not age well. But I just think that was Giannis just finding his range, finding his rhythm, and just got caught something he wasn't expecting. And, though Costa was having a lot of success. Not much of an offensive wrestler, weak defensive wrestler, but he did show, and this is going back a long time ago now, but like going against the Miles Johns fight, like his ability to get back up. He's a BJJ black belt. He's not much of a submission threat, but if he catches Rob Font in a submission, I'd be surprising, but it could happen. I think this is a tough fight. I think it's a tough fight to pick. Despite seeing Rob Font a lot of times, I've never had a strong read on him, because even like good Rob Font, I was never like, I don't know. I just something about him. I like Giannis a lot, but I don't love Giannis. Like, I know so many people are super high on him. So many people are crowning him like a future champion, and I'm not that high on him to that point. Now, I really wanted to do that. You're reading off the card, and I don't think I've picked an underdog yet based on the odds, and maybe we got 2 fights left that maybe I'll go with an underdog. So I was like, you know what? I'll go with the Font. Like Boston, we didn't plan it this way, but you got your Houston hat on. I got my Boston hat on. But then I'm like, all right, I can't get past Rob Font losing to Jose Aldo at that point in his career. And then got battered. Like, he wasn't even competitive against Marlon Vera, which since Marlon Vera, Marlon Vera's been really good, but they're like, you saw what Corey Sandhagen did to Marlon Vera. Yeah. So that loss, it looks a little worse now than it did a month ago. And it wasn't it wasn't a competitive fight. Like, Marlon Vera beat the brakes off him. So I'm going to go with Giannis. I think Giannis, it just kind of seems like a little bit of a passing of the torch fight. I'm worried about Giannis giving away rounds to Font. I think we might see Font wrestle a lot. Like, I think it might be something that people might be surprised. And I think that's the best avenue for victory for Font if he turns into a wrestling match. But I'm still going to go with Giannis. I think he's a cleaner striker, faster. Give me Giannis by decision.
Yeah, I like everything about the breakdown there. And I definitely agree on the ways that a lot of observers, myself included, really kind of misclassify these guys' strengths. I've thought for a couple of years now that Font was one of the better pure boxers in that division, and it definitely starting with his jab. He's one of the guys that about 2 years ago, I kind of put him into that category with Kamaru Usman, where the jab is not simply a tool, but a weapon. Like, the jab itself is like doing significant damage and changing the opponent's whole game plan. And I thought that was true right up through the Garbrandt fight. I picked Vera in the Font fight, but I would not have been surprised if Font had ended up doing to Vera something like Sandhagen just did. Like, I picked Font, I picked Vera, but my thought, and I probably said it on our preview at the time, was, if this is a case where Font just outclasses Vera, I won't be that surprised. But man, not only did that not happen, but he just took a world of damage there. And I'm glad he's had a full year off. He is a cartel guy along with Cater, isn't he?
Yeah, those are like the original guys.
Yeah. Like, I wonder if this is a case where maybe kind of like he did for Cater, like Tyson Chartier said, let's take like some actual time off here. Let your body, like fully heal and then retool for this next fight.
He's also 35. That's concerning to me.
It is, because for people not named Jose Aldo, being 35 is not good territory. No. You saw what he did to Marlon Moraes. Like, this division is not normally kind to the elderly. More of them look like Marlon Moraes than Jose Aldo. Yeah. Just it's yet another case where, Font's been off almost a whole year, and I'm sure that recuperation will help him off of 2 pretty brutal battles. But at best, he's going to be returning to whatever the best 35-year-old version of Rob Font is, while Yanez is still very much on the upswing. And I agree. Like, I'm as big a fan of Yanez as you'll find. Like, he's a Houston guy. I mean, like, we're not good friends, but you know, he's a guy that I see him at shows. He's happy to see me. Like,
he seems like a good dude.
It's a super
I've
good dude.
interviewed him before. He seems like a really good dude.
Yeah, really good dude. And again, he's the guy that at age 27, like, took over Metro Fight Club. You know, when Solis died.
Let me interrupt you again. One thing I want to say, like, I'm not saying he's a champion, but that also has a lot to do with the weight class. Where if he was middleweight or light heavyweight, he's got all skills. If you have Giannis skilled light heavyweight, I'm picking him to win the title.
Yeah,
that's one thing I just want to clarify. Like, it's a great division.
No, Giannis is a guy who does a couple of things at an elite level and has a couple of relative weak spots. Like, he's not the same guy anymore, I don't think, that got out rustled by Miles Johns, like, let alone the guy that got out grappled by Levi Moles like almost 10 years ago. But the general idea that he, as a boxer who kicks, is susceptible to the takedown and isn't always super great at getting back up, that's still the case. He's just a better version of the guy that Miles Johns did that to 5 years ago.
Just imagine him against Aljamain Sterling right now. No, I'm not saying he couldn't win. No, his striking is so dynamic. But
ironically, those guys probably know exactly what that looks like because he was in several of Sterling's camps simulating Peter Yan for him.
And don't you just see, like, Sterling taking him down, taking his back, and doing what Aljamain Sterling does,
and Merab doing it maybe worse. So,
oh god, yes,
yeah. So I'm not picking Yanez as a future champ, and I mean, it's the classic thing you hear whenever there's a striker moving up one of those divisions. I want to see him against a wrestler. Font might be it. You made the point. Font, his offensive wrestling in particular is as underrated as anything about his striking is overrated. I always picture him until he gets in the cage as being taller and skinnier and lankier than he is. And then I'm always surprised when he gets in there and he's actually,
he's a big guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's not Merab, but he's a little stockier and more built than I always expect him to be. Like, and his offensive wrestling is good. The question is, will he turn to it? Because if he chooses to conduct this fight entirely on the feet, I do think he's going to just get outstruck by Yanez. Like, who knows? Maybe Yanez doesn't really crank it up until the next round. Maybe, like, it's one of the reasons he's probably a good guy to simulate Peter Yan for you. Yanez spends the early time kind of getting his bearings, but he's kind of getting into that in the zone point where once he turned it on against Tony Kelly couldn't lay a finger on him. And just everything he threw landed with unexpected power because it was coming at unexpected angles and unexpected times. Hopefully the Yanez that kind of gave Davey Grant and Randy Costa brawls is gone. Hopefully that guy is in the rear view because now he's running Metro Fight Club, but he's having Eve Edwards run his own camps for him. So he has an actual head coach figure that's cornering him and training him for specific opponents. I understand why the line is what it is here. I'm not surprised. If I were a betting man, I wouldn't touch this, but I do think this is going to be a good night for Yanez. Give me Yanez probably to win the second and third rounds. If he's slow to really turn on the jets, maybe he wins all three. Otherwise, I don't see a finish here. And it all becomes a different fight if Font tries to take him down early and often, but I'm guessing he probably doesn't. I'm guessing Font probably doesn't try to take down until or unless he really doesn't like what he's getting on the feet. And by then it might be too late. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC 287, a welterweight matchup between Gilbert Burns and Jorge Masvidal. Burns, the 36-year-old Brazilian by way of Florida, is 21-5 overall. He is 14-5 in the UFC. He is 7-2 since moving up from lightweight to welterweight. His only losses since moving up, his unsuccessful title challenge against Kamaru Usman back just a little over 2 years ago at UFC 258, and then his competitive and extremely exciting decision loss to Khamzat Chimaev almost exactly a year ago at UFC 273. Since that loss to Chimaev, Burns came back just this past January at UFC 283 and ran over Neil Magny on the ground on the way to a first round arm arm triangle choke submission. He'll look to make it 2 in a row. Will look to mint himself a continued factor in the title picture of his division against a fellow former title challenger in Masvidal. The 38-year-old Floridian is 35-16 overall. He is 12-9 in the UFC. He is 7-7 since moving up to welterweight from lightweight as well. He is on a 3-fight losing streak, though in his defense, the opponents in those 3 fights were Kamaru Usman again, and Colby Covington. The most recent of those fights, the Covington fight, was the headliner of UFC 272 last March. He lost a unanimous decision in which he got out-wrestled very badly for 25 minutes. He got his revenge in the street, allegedly sucker punching Covington and knocking some of his chiclets out. But that's a story for another grudge match, perhaps another day. Going into this fight, Burns is a prohibitive favorite. He is -500, Masvidal +350. Keith, this fight, I mean, we talked about it off the top, that it has extremely high stakes for the title picture, especially since Kamaru Usman is no longer the champ. These guys don't have that velvet rope between them and another shot at gold. There is a huge... I mean, it's rare that there's this big a line on a fight that could propel either guy to a title shot, but there it is. I mean, do you agree with it? If you don't agree with it, do you at least understand why it's in place and who you got in this one?
I think the line is based on how hard Masvidal hits. I think the line is, a little bit too wide. But I mean, I get that Burns is the favorite, and it seems like he's one of the easier guys on the card to pick. Side note, I want to do this. I know you sidestepped it because you're a professional, but again, I guess we could go get the police report and everything. I don't know what happened with Masvidal and Colby Covington and all that, but if he really snuck up on him at a restaurant from behind and punched him, I heard some people say there was breast. I don't know. You don't come off as cool. You come off like a criminal. Well, you're the good guy in this situation. Colby Covington's a bad guy. You're the bad guy. What are you doing? You had 25 minutes to punch a guy. What are you doing?
Well, thank you. That is it. I know that he said it was because Covington talked about his family and Covington crossed that line.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Masvidal had 25 minutes to do something about it.
Yeah. Even you talked about his family. You had 25 minutes to do it.
Yeah.
And then you had to sneak up to get him. If you called him out and you're at a restaurant, hey, Kobe, I'm outside, and he comes out and you do it Rocky 5 style, fight in an alley, it's still not cool, but at least but if you actually snuck up to him and punched him, again, allegedly, I have no idea.
Allegedly.
Maybe it was Rocky 5 or whatever, but anyways. Yeah. Kobe deserves to get punched, but at least give him the Leon Edwards face to face kind of thing. But regardless, no matter, even if you win that exchange, you look bad because you fought him and lost.
I mean, who knew that the guy who first came to our attention for boxing up Ray at the Boatyard, would have multiple unsanctioned fights since being signed to the UFC?
I know.
Who saw it coming?
Yeah, I know. That's a good point. I guess you should have known better.
Yeah.
And I get it. I know it's a lifestyle, and you think is keeping it real. I mean, it is whatever.
I thought he was out of that lifestyle and into the I wear Hugh Hefner robes and fight once a year style. That's the late 30s self,
Yeah, Connor does that too, and he fights. He's punching old man and all kinds of stuff too. So, I mean, it is what it is. They're cage fighters, so yeah. I'm not trying to get too high and mighty. Masvidal is in. I just don't like this matchup for Masvidal. If I'm matchmaking Masvidal, I'm trying to get him a name in the division, but an easy fight. The guy hasn't won a fight in a sanctioned MMA fight in 3.5 years. I don't know who that person is, off the top of my head, but it's not Gilbert Burns. And you put it in his hometown, you put it in Miami. What are you doing? Give him an easy win over. Get him, I don't know, Matt Brown or.
Yeah.
like, I mean, Donald Cerrone isn't around anymore, but that would have been like if Donald Cerrone was still around, or somebody like that would have made sense. Like Gilbert Burns, but anyways, I mean, Masvidal.
This is where you bring in Brian Barberena.
Yeah, I know. Shit, Brian Barberena would have been. If Brian Barberena had a big name, like who has a big name that's like completely shot everyone? I mean, if Diego Sanchez was still on the roster,
No, I mean, you named it Matt Brown, or if Cerrone had stuck around for one more fight, those are your guys.
Stuck around or something.
I mean,
like
he
that.
already plunked Cerrone once, like so.
Yeah, I mean, I know Darren Till can't make 170 anymore, but if he could have or something,
and he already knocked out Darren Till.
No, I know he did. He knocked out. I mean, I would say Stephen Thompson. He lost to Stephen Thompson, but then he probably loses that fight. But I don't know. I don't know the person. Put in the comments who the person was that I'm thinking. There's probably somebody, but I mean, Masvidal's a striker. He does move well. He's got good footwork. He can give away rounds because of his low volume. We were just talking about Adrian Yanez. But when he's throwing, snapping jab, his counter left hook is his best strike. That's the one that he put Darren Till out with. I love that he switches stances, and then he'll switch stance. If something that Adesanya does, he'll switch stance and then attack immediately before his opponent can make the adjustment. That's really good. I love his power combination, especially like his straight left to his left hook. Like he'll throw on the same side. He'll throw a straight left and come around with a left hook. I do think he's one of the biggest punchers in the division. He hits hard. He's got good leg kicks, though he doesn't throw them enough. He's an underrated offensive wrestler. He'll occasionally sneak in a takedown. More like if someone throws a body kick against him, he catches it and uses that, instead of just, I'm going to catch this and just let go of you, follow it to a takedown. But his takedown defense has really struggled against. Well, I think he's a hard guy to take down, except the upper echelon wrestlers, like Colby Covington, like Kamaru Usman. He's pretty good at scrambling. He's got, I said it's hard to take him down, and it's really hard to submit him. I mean, David Maia couldn't submit him in 15 minutes, and the last time he was submitted was 14 years ago.
It was a memorable one, though.
It was extremely memorable one that people always continue to bring up in the inverted triangle. But in fairness, he's going against Gilbert Burns. If there's anybody on the entire roster that could submit him, it's Gilbert Burns, or not. I shouldn't say anybody on the roster, but he's in the club of guys in the roster that could submit him. And I know someone to say, well, Dan Maya could submit him. I know. I already said that. So Gilbert Burns. He's a very intelligent fighter. It's something like he's so explosive and he's so dynamic. I don't think people talk about how intelligent he is. He knows where his advantage is, and he's well-rounded, and he gets it there, and he puts himself in the position to win. He's got fast hands, tight inside boxing. He attacks with combos. He gets in the pocket, and he unloads big shots. He's a hard hitter. He starts Damon Maia. Gilbert Burns was seconds away, if you remember, from winning the UFC welterweight title. I mean, he had Kamaru Usman hurt. Yep. Dude, he had Chimaev hurt. Mm-hmm. He wants to be the bull. He wants to be pressing. Burns was the tide turn in the Kamaru Usman fight when Usman was able to pressure him. The last time Burns didn't look great. I mean, he still won, but it's like Alexei Kunchenko was pressing him, forcing him on the back foot. That's what you got to do with Gilbert Burns. I don't know if Masvidal is that guy that can do that, because he doesn't get backed up. Like even Dave Maya backed him up to the fence and tried grappling him. He struggled with the jab of Usman and Chimaev, but those are like two massive welterweights, and he's obviously the shortest welterweight in the division, I think. So that has to do, with their height and their reach. He's got a great chin, though. I mean, he's taken some damage and just keeps coming. He's a good, dirty boxer, and on the ground, I mean, he's an elite of the elite. He's a 3-time world champion. Yep. Good takedowns. He made not that this is the perfect example, but he made Stephen Thompson look like a takedown dummy. Just good entries. We think about it. When we talk about grapplers, I say this a lot, he's a BJJ grappler, but he's not a wrestler. Burns is the guy who he can wrestle for, again, within reason. He's not going to out wrestle, Yanni Diakomahalis or anything. So take it, but for MMA wrestling, he's a good wrestler. He slammed Tyron Woodley with a power double. He's landed body lock taker. He's done hip throws. I mean, I go back to the Gunnar Nelson fight when he threw Gunnar Nelson with a judo throw, which is quite a feat. Gunnar Nelson's a good grappler himself. Incredible top control. He's got brutal ground and pound. Obviously, a submission threat. He only needs 1 second to lock in submission. I mean, look at his fight against Neil Magny. Just took him down, subbed him. Yeah, Burns is a big favorite, and I think if the UFC's rooting for Masvidal to win, it's in Miami. He's a bigger name, but I think this is really poor matchmaking in their part. I'd like Burns here. I think he has advantage everywhere. I think he takes Masvidal down. I think he works him on the ground for 15 minutes. I think he might even land some better shots on the feet due to Masvidal dropping his hands, worrying about Burns' takedowns. So like second round, third round, Burns might land some big shots on the feet. I really only give Masvidal a puncher's chance, like landing one big shot. So give me Burns by dominant decision win.
Yeah, I wish I had something to bring here to be contrary, but I agree with the entire breakdown there. And I definitely agree that Burns is on the very top shelf of elite BJJ artists who have developed an actual like wrestling game. Like he's up there with your, Jacare is kind of the prototype to me, like a world-class BJJ guy who just learned to wrestle. And
Dave Maya had that single, like that really, that single. Yeah.
Single and plenty of unexpected ways to finish it that didn't need him to be a super athlete.
Yeah. He'd find ways to like get down to his wrap around leg, get down his hip and then sweep over and stuff. Yeah. So he still had he's not that explodes through your hips like Burns is.
No, Maya never had that athleticism, but he still like lateral drop Chael Sonnen, like Chael Sonnen had never wrestled before.
That definitely is one of the most impressive moments.
Like, and he is an explosive athlete. He hits stupid hard. Like Masvidal has power that just comes from real solid technique. Like it doesn't look like he's hitting blistering hard until like he catches some guy clean and he just drops like he did to Darren Till. Like Burns, it looks like he should hit crazy hard, and sure enough he does. The problem for me here is Masvidal's routes to victory all seem either just unlikely to happen against Burns or unlikely for Masvidal to do against anybody. His problems with defensive wrestling have definitely been exposed against Usman and Covington. He is not, Burns is not quite that level of takedown artist, although I think he should be able to get takedowns against Masvidal if and when he wants. Masvidal, he needs a Ben Askren who's just not a great athlete and kind of comes running heedlessly at you, for a telegraphed and very long, like double leg. Burns not going to do that. Masvidal hits stupid hard. Darren Till was beating him until, second round, Masvidal catches him with that nasty left hook and Till's gone. Burns has been lamped in the pocket before, but you have to go all the way back to the Dan Hooker fight where he was still fighting at lightweight. He was not as good a striker as he is now, and he was making a huge weight cut that probably compromised his chin pretty badly. Like that kind of thing has not happened to welterweight Gilbert Burns, really. Like the people who've beaten Gilbert Burns at welterweight are ultra powerful wrestlers and outstanding athletes in Kamaru Usman and Khamzat Chimaev. Masvidal is neither of them.
No.
Like, I don't even think Masvidal is going to get a comfortable Masvidal fight because the scouting report and the complaint and charm of him up until kind of his superstar break in 2019 was that like he had like 5 split decision losses in the UFC because he was a little too content to showboat and leave rounds closer than they needed to be because he was the ultimate example of the guy that thinks he's winning if you're missing him. Like I don't like Burns isn't even going to give him that kind of fight. He's not going to give him a comfortable split decision loss. I think Burns is going to take it to him because Burns suffers when he's put on his back foot by somebody who can push him around a little bit. That's not Masvidal. Masvidal doesn't tend to put his opponents on the back foot. He tends to wait for him. I think Burns is going to put the screws to Masvidal in this fight. Masvidal has not had a submission loss, like you said, in like 14 years. It was at 155 pounds in that first season of Bellator. It was one of the YouTube viral moments that helped make Bellator into, now probably the number 2 promotion in the world. But I think Masvidal gets his second submission loss in a decade and a half here. Give me Burns to be winning this fight by the third round, like already winning handily by the time he takes Masvidal down one more time, and reminds us that he is a 3-time Mundials champ and a former Abu Dhabi bronze medalist. Beats him up a little bit. Masvidal turns his back, gets the rear naked choke.
All right, I got the names for you.
All right, hit me.
All right, so a guy that is an easy fight for Masvidal, but a big name, George St. Pierre. Right, that's an easy win for Masvidal, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I called it Joe Rogan, right? I don't know if 40-year-old George St. Pierre comes out of retirement, hasn't fought like 5 years, 7 years, whatever it was. I still think I'd take GSP.
That's
maybe not now, but prime GSP. That was one of the, listen, I get the like talking, like trust me, I get the like pump up a guy who's fighting. I get that, but like stay in your lane a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm one of these guys. I believe that athletes are better now. Like, I think Matt Hughes would have really struggled. Like, a prime Matt Hughes would have struggled now. And but like, not George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre would have ruined what he busted up.
When St. Pierre was at his absolute best, when he like pummeled BJ Penn into quitting in 2009, that was literally within a month of when Masvidal got inverted triangle choked by Toby Imada.
No, I'm trying to say, I'm talking about prime George St. Pierre versus prime Masvidal.
Like
I'm saying like if you could have fast forward prime George St. Pierre to like
here's the follow-up question. Tell me when is prime Masvidal? Like what's Masvidal's best win?
Darren Till. Flying knee Ben Askren. I mean, it's only 5 seconds, but yeah.
Yeah,
right?
I mean
that like those back to back.
Those are the highest ranked opponents he's beaten for sure, And
Darren Till, I don't think he's won one fight since, and Ben Askren had to have hip surgery and was getting knocked out by Jake Paul.
Yeah,
not that long after. So yeah, they didn't age well.
Yeah, like with that, we come to the main event of UFC 287, a middleweight title fight between defending champ Alex Pereira and challenger, former champ Israel Adesanya. Pereira, the 35-year-old Brazilian by way of Connecticut, New England's own, is 7-1 overall. He's 4-0 in the UFC, a run that has seen him capture the title with as little relative experience as almost any champ in modern promotional history. He knocked out Adesanya in the 5th round at UFC 281 last November. In the last round of a fairly back and forth fight. Prior to that, he had knocked out Sean Strickland, taken a pretty one-sided unanimous decision over Bruno Silva, and blown out Andreas Michailidis with a flying knee. For the first defense of his career, he will take on the man from whom he took the title, and a man with whom he, of course, very famously has some history in the kickboxing ring as well, former champ Israel Adesanya. The 33-year-old Nigerian by way of New Zealand is 23-2 overall. He is 12-2 in the UFC. He is 12-1 at middleweight. He, of course, went completely undefeated in his division on the way to winning the title, defending it multiple times. Almost exactly 2 years ago at UFC 259, he moved up to light heavyweight, attempting to become a 2-division champ. He came up short against then champ Jan Blachowicz. Afterwards, returned to 185, rattled off unanimous decision wins over Marvin Vettori, Robert Whittaker, and Jared Cannonier before running into Pereira last November. Odds coming into the rematch. And Keith, I know that you do everything you can to avoid seeing the odds before I read them off to you. Despite the way the last fight ended, Adesanya comes into the rematch a slight favorite. He is minus 140, Pereira plus 120. Keith, I'm definitely going to throw this one to you first, but to me, if a title fight ended, with a stoppage win and the losing fighter is still is still the favorite coming into a rematch. I mean,
we saw that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. And fluke is a matter of opinion, obviously, but it tells me that whoever is betting on this and driving those lines thinks that the losing fighter has things that they can take back to the drawing board and fix. Whereas the fighter who won has to thread a very similar needle once again. I mean, tell me if you agree with that, and tell me, obviously you're going to tell me who you think wins, but do you think the general complexion of this fight looks at all similar to their first fight?
Gosh, I'll say this. We just saw this a couple weeks ago with Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman, where Kamaru Usman got knocked out in the 5th round and then came into the next fight as the favorite. And like I don't know what the odds were, but he was pretty significant. I think it was even
it was wider than this. It was at least a 2-1 favorite.
Okay, yeah. And that didn't work out well.
And the fight looked totally different.
Completely different.
Yeah.
And I've seen people are, already debating online and who's going to win this fight between Adesanya and Pereira and different things. And, the Adesanya camp saying, all the things that he was doing right. And then the Pereira camp talking about, 3-0, they always had those kickboxing and 3-0. And I do find it funny, the guy they faced each other 3 times in combat sports, and he's got back-to-back knockout wins, and he's the underdog again. I find that funny. I feel like based on these guys' skills, how anybody could be super confident in a pick. Because I've seen guys some people are like, oh, Adesanya's going to win for sure. Or other people are like, no, Pereira's going to. How you can watch the skills of these guys. Like if you picked Adesanya, the whole time you got to be terrified on the edge of your seat that Pereira's just going to land that bomb left hand or a straight right or whatever. And then if you're Pereira, you're like, yeah, man, he's going to win that. You got to be at the edge of your seat every time he throws it, he misses. And you're like, oh, man, Adesanya's banking minutes and banking rounds. And you're sitting at the clock and you're waiting for it, hoping it's going to land. Kind of like Sandhagen and Marlon Vera a couple weeks ago, where you wait for Marlon Vera to win a big shot and it just doesn't come. Let me ask you this. One guy's 3-0, but doesn't it seem like the biggest rivalry in MMA right now? Of active guys who are fighting, not talking all the time, not talking DC and Jones, but like right now, what's a bigger rivalry in MMA?
That's a fair question, because this feels like a huge deal.
And it is. I'm super excited. I'm excited for every main event. I'm excited for every card. Like even we downplay it a little bit, and sometimes it's a little bit for like entertainment too. But there's nothing I'd rather do on a Saturday night than watch fights. Nothing.
Well, I'm more excited about this fight than I was the first fight, obviously, because I had Adesanya winning the first fight pretty comfortably in the preview, and up until a minute into the 5th round, I was like, well, this was tougher for him than I thought, but
maybe because I was in attendance, I was in the arena, I was in New York City, I was there all week long interviewing the fighters, seeing Pereira walking around, seeing Adesanya walk around, seeing Adesanya come in with his whole entourage. He had like 80 people with him, and Pereira just being in New York, just everything in New York City just seemed bigger. You walk out of the hotel, the hotel's right in downtown Times Square, and seeing the big billboards and the celebrities and all that. So I will say that I was more excited for their first fight. But again, it's just something about New York City. They're just different. Mm-hmm. I was so excited. Like their entrance music was perfect, and Madison Square Garden, and as far as this fight, so let me tell you something. What I did. So right before we started, we started filming this Sunday night at 9:00, and it was about 8:15, maybe 8:10. I was pretty much like, all right, I'm done with I'm not doing any more tape study. Usually I just go right up to the clock, right up to you. Mm-hmm. And you hit YouTube, you get the things that you search for, you get suggestions, and I love watching like technical wrestling videos and moves. And it was like a Jeff Jaggers like highlight video. So I'm like watching like this Ohio State wrestler from like, I don't know, early mid 2005-ish or something like that. So I'm watching one of his videos, and then it like rolls into a Bo Nickel video, and then it rolls in. Guys, you guys actually thought I wasn't gonna get a Bo Nickel reference in there. Of course I'm gonna. And then it gets to ESPN, and it's Fortis MMA head coach Saif Sayud breaking down this event where it's like it's one of those, I forget what it's called, but I think it's called like UC Breakdown or something like that. It's super technical. It's like film studies, like slow motion in this. So I feel like we do the most in-depth show. I really believe that we do the most in-depth show there is. But this is just the main event. We do the entire card. That's what I mean by it. But I always feel like, oh man, we go more technical than anybody else and this and that. And then I watched like Coach Sayud like break down like this skill set. And you know what I feel like? Like I thought I had a master's degree, and then I realized I'm the kid in kindergarten who's reading at a first grade level and feeling special. Because I'm watching his breakdown and I'm like, it's absolutely fantastic. So I feel like a dummy now trying to break this down after watching that, but I'll try my best. Alex Pereira, I'll start with the champion. Long and lengthy fighter. I know I've told you this off air. I don't know if I told you on air. The last time, when they fought each other, I was there, and I go to New York City the day of the media day. That's the first thing. I leave super early in the morning. I drive up there. I get there, and it's like, because they interview like pretty much the entire card. There's like 20 guys. But you interview for like 10 minutes, and there's like a little break and stuff, and then 10 minutes later, another guy goes up and whatever. So I like go to the bathroom, and I walk out, and I see Alex Pereira. He is the biggest dude in person. Like, I can't describe to you. This is a guy cutting weight at this time. The guy looks like a freaking heavyweight. He is so big. In fact, I came back, and I went to the bathroom. I walked right by him. I went to the bathroom, and then because he was coming up next, or maybe he was up like, because they go in another room and they like meet with DC and Joe Rogan and everything, and they go to another room and they taking, they do those pictures. You know what I'm talking about, the way they're like, the camera guys taking pictures of them for the promos and whatever. So I don't even like notice that it's him, because he's got like a hoodie on, but like you can see his face, but he's so big that it doesn't even register in my head. This is Alex Pereira. Just like, I'm thinking it's like some heavyweight in the card or someone's huge freaking teammate or some shit like that. Then I walk back and I see him again. And I'm like, holy shit, that's the guy fighting in the main event. I didn't even reckon, like, that's how fucking big this dude is. He's humongous. Anyways, back to his actual skills. He's obviously an elite striker. Glory, multi-time glory, kickboxing champion, fast hands, extremely explosive, extremely accurate. He's best when he's marching forward, and everything's short shots, like no tells, can land, a kill shot in this smallest of space. His left hook is like a cheat code. It's like a video game. You're playing a video game and you get like a superpower, and like I play Smash Brothers with my son, and he knows all the tricks, and I'm just hitting buttons, I'm just hitting things like this, and he knows like left, right, up, down, selected. That's gonna get him some superpower thing. You ever play Smash Brothers?
Sure.
Okay. He punches me. We're like on an island. He punches me and I fall in the water. Like that's like Alex Pereira's left hook, where he just knocks you off the island. And I'm freaking Donkey Kong trying to get back on the island. I can't do it. My 8-year-old son's laughing at me because he's so good at it. That's Alex Pereira. He can shot while he can strike while backing up. He can also like back up and then suddenly just stop on a dime and just land this shot. He has so much power, and it's because he has perfect foot placement. He's got such a wide base, strong base, where he generates so much power from his legs. You see it against Bruno Silva fight. We saw it against Sean Strickland, where at times he won't throw enough. But when he lands, it's deadly. And then even the last fight against Adesanya, he wasn't matching the volume of Adesanya. He has great leg kicks. It's something that Adesanya actually addressed in the post-fight press conference. He was talking about, we always talk about the knockout. Was it early? Was it early stoppage? Fifth round in a fight that Adesanya's winning. There's a big debate about it. But Adesanya was talking about like the leg kicks. I'm surprised Adesanya admitted that, because if it's to me, I don't want to admit it unless Adesanya is he tries to get people's head into maybe the leg kicks weren't bothering him, and he's trying to know they're gonna have a rematch and sprinkling it out there for him. So because he's worried about the left hook instead. Maybe, I don't know. But if it was bothering him, I'm surprised that Adesanya threw that out there about how much he said his legs were bothering him. He does keep his chin high and he drops his hands. Like that's one thing. Coach Saif Sayed was talking about, like how low he keeps that left hand, which is a good and bad thing. It's a good thing because you don't see it coming. The bad thing is there's no defense. I think he's good in the plump clinch because he's big, beautiful knees, weak takedown defense. I mean, Adesanya took him down. Adesanya lateral dropped him, and he struggled to get back up in. I think it was the
third
round. Okay, it was third round. I wasn't sure it was third or fourth, but third round he put a big chunk on his back, which is an issue. But I'm not putting him in the bank for sure, because one of these guys who's newer to MMA and just his size, like it's still a lot of energy to take some guy down, hold him down. Now, and plus he's got a fantastic team and a fantastic coach. And if you really think about it, Teixeira MMA and Connecticut, obviously they're attracted more talent and is becoming a bigger team, but it still almost feels like a boxing camps where it's like very centrally focused on one guy. Mm-hmm. It's still a smaller team. Yeah. So like they can address some things. Like I'm sure they're addressing the way he got back up and the way he got taken out. Like I'm sure they're really focused on some of that stuff. Now, Adesanya, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. He's my favorite guy to watch film on. Long and lengthy fighter, very poised striker. He's a master at fighting out of both stances. I've said this before, I'm saying it again. Is Adesanya an orthodox fighter or is he southpaw? I don't know, because he flows so like now. Like a lot of guys will fight out of both stances, but he flows out of both stances. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, okay, I'm orthodox now. Okay, let me switch. I'm no. He just boom. It's just way a guy attacks him the way he cuts corners. He'll turn like he doesn't like back away or circle away. He just like changes stance, changes foot placement, and then he's suddenly he's southpaw on you. He's got great footwork. He's constantly lining up his feet on the outside alignment to set up his straight shots. He's like Anderson Silva and John Jones and these greats where he's setting up. He's starts off a little slow, just setting up traps. Faking with a hip, faking with a shoulder, just trying to see how you're going to react things. He's very good at changing up his tempo, where he'll attack at one speed and next change he attacks at a different speed or change. So it's kind of hard to get his timing. He's fantastic at hand fighting, where he's grabbing hand, he's pulling, he's throwing a shot and pulling things down to set up his shots, set up his distance. He uses feints, fantastic, freezes guys, fast hands. I've said it before. He's got like sniper level accuracy. You see how he landed on Derek Brunson or the first Robert Whittaker fight, the Paulo Costa fight. Even Pinheiro, he was landing a lot of clean shots. People forget, and I know you did your tape study for this, like, and I'm not saying this happened, but Alex Pereira might have been saved by the bell in the first round. Israel Adesanya landed a huge, I think it was a right hand. I think it was like a slip right at the end of the first round. And Pinheiro his legs buckled. He did that like, oh shit. And then he gets hit with a left hook right at the buzzer comes, where if there's 10 more seconds, Adesanya might have put him out. Now, I'm not saying he did. I'm just saying like that's a possibility. Adesanya is very defensively sound, good head movement, kind of rolls with shots. Mixes punches and kicks so well. Big kicking game, such dexterity in his kicks. He was having a lot of success with the inside kicks against Pereira in the first fight. There was like a question mark kick up so effortlessly. He doesn't get enough credit for how hard he hits. Muay Thai clinch is good. He's got some foot sweeps. I think he's an underrated grappler. I really do. I don't think he gets enough credit. Like people talk about, oh wow, Adesanya take down Pereira. Like he can't be that good. Like top wrestlers will beat Pereira, and I think there's some truth to that. But I also think there's a lot of just looking past Adesanya's ground game. I think he's better than people think. Like I don't think he's a no. Let me wrong. I don't think he's a good ground wrestler. I just think he's improved and he's better. I think he does need to improve his takedown tests, but he's not the chump on the ground that people think he is. So, as far as prediction, to me, that's like even, and I understand that setting a betting line has some to do with Vegas understanding how money works, and they have algorithms, and who's going to get bet on, and them trying to maximize. I understand there's some of that, but I think it's insulting to even have it like Adesanya as a favorite. Like to me, this should be a straight pick 'em. Like just negative 100, negative 100, just or whatever the line, how you do pick 'em. Adesanya is 0-3 in combat sports against Pereira, but in those matches, I feel like he won like 80% of the exchanges. I've said this to you before, but their first kickboxing match, I thought Adesanya won. Like I thought it was a clear decision for Adesanya. He was winning the second round, probably even more comfortable than he was winning the first round until he got absolutely knocked out, and then he was winning this one. Now, a lot of people debated the finish. I do think the finish was on the earlier side of the acceptable range. If there's that I heard Nolan King say this once, where like this is the perfect, like if there's a line, like people watching the show, there's a line between me and Ben right now. That's the perfect stoppage, and say Ben's on the early side, I'm on the late side. Like the stoppage was like Ben's nose, like a little on the early side, but it was completely acceptable. And I think if Goddard didn't jump in then 1 or 2 punches later, he would have had to it would be like Adesanya was going down.
And it doesn't matter ultimately whether there were 3 minutes left in the round or 3 seconds. Oh. But like obviously if there were 3 seconds left in the fight and that got stopped, there'd be a lot more yelling. But I mean, you never want to see your most dominant champ go down on a standing TKO,
Yeah.
But I don't think it was unacceptably early either. Go ahead and finish your prediction. Otherwise, I'll just take the mic.
So, I mean, Adesanya had won to me if you add up like the amount of time they've sparred against, got in there and fought. So, part of me leans to Adesanya, but then part of me just goes, perhaps Pereira just has his number. Like there's something about it. Like perhaps he's the Eli Manning to Tom Brady, or I'm not calling Adesanya the GOAT or Pereira, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like some guys have their numbers. And I know this is a narrative that was brought up when Leon Edwards won the belt, and I believe in this. I think when they say that when you win the title, you instantly become like 30% better. Like I don't know about the percentage or whatever, but there becomes this confidence you get when you win, where Pereira, might feel even better now moving in. Like I've beat him in MMA now, and I have this confidence, and I know like, okay, I did all these things wrong for the first 4 rounds, but I did this right. I forced him back. I got him in that warning track. I got him to the parts where he couldn't escape. So, obviously, so I picked Adesanya last time, and I have way less confidence this time, but I'm going to go Adesanya. I do feel like he has the better skills. I think he's faster. I think he's got more options. I think he might surprise people, and I think he might fight all the way out. And then I think we might see a lot of him crash in the pocket where, one, he's trying to get around Pereira's kicks. And I think he might wrestle more. I think we might see him trying to get to the distance, get in the clinch. He was winning a lot of the Muay Thai clinch. Maybe get a takedown or two. But don't be surprised if Adesanya wrestles, because I do think he has advantage there. But a part of me loves picking Adesanya to win, and I'll tell you what, because again, I don't really root for fighters. I've told you this before. Like I root for the storyline. What's the best storyline? And I think the best storyline would be Adesanya winning. We set up a trilogy because I think it's such a fantastic matchup. But also the reason why I like picking Adesanya win because I'm gonna be on the edge of my seat the whole time, worried. Oh, and worried in like a I pick Adesanya win, but also worried like what's gonna happen? He's gonna land that big shot. Like it's I feel like it's like a lion fighting. Like remember Lion King when like the lion fought like the bunch of hyenas?
Yeah.
Where like you give me one lion versus one hyena, like yeah, I'll take the lion all day. But you give me one lion against 5 hyenas, like they're all moving around, they're dancing like that. Could be Adesanya, he's messing around, they're jumping on his neck, biting his ankle. But that lion, he's getting bit and he's getting weaker, but boom, if he catches a jackal's, or a hyena's neck, all of a sudden now it's not. Now it's 1-on-4. Does it again. Now it's 1-on-3. He gets it down to 1-on-2. All of a sudden the hyenas are running home without a dinner. That's kind of feel like. So people who are, if you picked Adesanya to win, you're going to be nervous the whole time. Like, and I'm going to take Adesanya by decision. I think he finally gets over the hump and gets the win.
As a storyline, that would be fantastic. It would set up yet another iteration of probably the greatest series of striking battles we've ever seen in mixed martial arts. Like 2 of the very greatest strikers we've ever seen.
So good.
So I would be very happy to see that. Obviously, I called their first fight in MMA wrong. I predicted Adesanya would win, and I can't remember whether I picked a finish late, but I either picked Adesanya to get the finish late, or I picked him to kind of win going away on an increasingly kind of frustrated, tired Pereira. I mean, I was wrong in the outcome of the fight, and I was wrong in the complexion of the fight. And so that, I'm thinking about the parts of my thinking that I have to re-examine going into the rematch, and it fits in nicely with the adjustments that they're going to have to make. Adesanya was able to take Pereira down. He took him down in the 3rd round. The thing is, he was able to do enough there to win the round, but never seriously, I never did any substantial damage or threatened to finish. And it's an open question whether he could just become wrestler Izzy and try to do that for 3 rounds out of 5, because it must take an enormous amount of energy to hold Alex Pereira down, just as huge as he is. And Pereira is, relatively speaking, green as an MMA fighter. Another 4 or 5 months of working with Glover Teixeira every day, one of the heaviest top position grapplers and most underrated wrestlers in MMA history, is going to make actual substantive improvements for him. This isn't like a 30-fight veteran getting 1 more training camp. This is an 8-fight veteran getting 1 more training camp, and really an 8-fight veteran that's going to like his 5th fight since coming back and deciding to do this seriously. Adesanya was generally the classier striker. He outlanded Pereira in terms of volume, I'm pretty sure in every round, even the rounds that Pereira won and even the round that Pereira finished the fight, and with surprising amounts of power, but he never really got flowing. He never seemed completely comfortable, even when he was winning rounds, even when he was the guy landing more strikes. The way he, against just about everybody else, has gotten into that kind of matrix flow state that you described, where he starts moving and it becomes so seamless that it makes the concept of stance almost irrelevant. He never really reached that against Pereira. And part of it, I think, is he's just not used to being the smaller guy in the cage in a striking match, and probably wary of the power. And it turns out rightly so in the end. Whoever wins, I'm excited to see what this fight looks like, because, obviously we had a couple of, title rematches in the last few years, like even leaving aside the Moreno-Figueiredo series, but like when Juliana Pena beat Amanda Nunes, I said in the rematch, Nunes is going to win, and the fight's not going to look anything like the first one. Like Nunes isn't going to overexert herself looking for the first round knockout. She's not going to be tired and vulnerable to get tapped out. She's just going to go out there and make a point. And I ended up right about that one. When Usman and Edwards fought again, I said, this is going to look exactly like their second fight, only Usman's not going to make one huge mistake at the end. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Edwards came in with a whole new game plan, a brilliant one. And it was just completely uncontroversial. He washed him. It was a shockingly good performance. Here, I'm leaning Pereira, even though I agree with you that I think Adesanya is the more skilled fighter in a vacuum. And I think if you had these two guys fight everybody else in the top 15, and I mean, it's almost cheating because Adesanya's fought almost everybody else in the top 15, but if you had them both fight everybody else in the top 15, Adesanya would have a much better record against the field. But this just isn't a great matchup for Adesanya. Like, this is a guy that he looks human against even when he's winning, and humans always make mistakes, at least one. And in Adesanya's case, it's all it's taken. This is twice now that he was winning a fight, and in one moment, like one lapse defensively, he's gotten hurt badly and finished. And Pereira, yeah, that left hook, it was one of the most devastating single strikes in kickboxing for years. It's probably the most devastating single strike in MMA right now. If you want a video game reference, if you're like me and you're old enough that you once had a Nintendo 64, you played GoldenEye, it's like the Golden Gun, where there's only one. And if you find it, it doesn't matter what machine gun the other guy has, because the Golden Gun just kills everybody with one hit. And that's pretty much Alex Pereira's left hook. I think this one probably will look in broad strokes like the first fight. I'm sure they're going to make some adjustments. There'll be differences in the nuance. It's not going to be Usman versus Edwards 3, where it's just a totally different look. I think it's going to look similar in general strokes. I think Adesanya is probably going to win rounds. He's going to outland Pereira. Pereira in the first fight all of a sudden looked tired in the second and third round and then just found the second wind. That'll probably happen this time. If Adesanya tries to take him down, he'll probably be able to. But I think just that moment is going to present itself, and Pereira's going to be the guy to take it again. Give me Alex Pereira. I'm going to say fourth round knockout, because if he wins, I don't think it's going to be a decision. I think he's going to catch him, hurt him, and finish it. So give me Pereira to defend with a fourth round TKO. Maybe this time it'll be completely uncontroversial. Any last thoughts on this one?
Let me ask you this. So you just picked Pereira. How shocked would it be if Adesanya wins by knockout?
Not terribly.
Yeah, me neither. Just like I'd be not shocked. Yeah. I'm not shocked if Pereira wins a decision. Like, yeah. Check out. I mean, Pereira wins by submission would probably surprise me, I guess, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he just learned the big bully uncle arm triangle choke from Glover Teixeira, and he's going to bust that out on Adesanya. Who knows?
Who knows?
At any rate, that has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 287, Pereira versus Adesanya 2. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Shillan. If this is your first time listening to or watching one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We appreciate it. We do our best to bring as in-depth a top-to-bottom preview as you'll find in this industry, and you get occasional story time or inappropriate jokes as well. Please do give us a like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Keith and I both are good about responding to those comments. Let us know if you see any upsets coming down the pike that we didn't see, or you think any of our picks are out of our minds. Let us know. And we definitely would love to hear from you and go back and forth with you. But most importantly, join us for the recap. Keith and I are live on the Sherdog YouTube page, usually about 10 minutes after the main event, where Keith takes the captain's chair, and we will talk about this whole card top to bottom. We'll start from the main event, go all the way down to the first prelim. We'll talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We will talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. And the live chat on the recap is wide open that whole time. So we are taking your questions, your comments, and your thoughts in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy the fights.